Chapter 57. Chapter 57, Join the Queue. Ling Han walked over to the study table and took up a pen and paper. With very good penmanship, he immediately started writing on the paper. He wrote very quickly, and soon lifted his pen from the paper. He then handed the paper he had written on to Zhang Weishan. Because of Zhu Hexian, he had still decided to give Zhang Weishan a helping hand. After all, the old man has always been at his beck and call, and has helped him considerably. More importantly, it was he who had provided Ling Han with information about the whereabouts of the Earth Dragon grass. Zhang Weishan received the paper, and as his eyes swept over it, an expression of surprise and joy appeared on his face. This was the pill formula for the reverse pill. It definitely was, because not only were the medicinal ingredients the same as what he had on his incomplete formula, even the quantities required were the same. Furthermore, there were even additional 3 ingredients that could not be read from the incomplete formula. Zhang Weishan was extremely excited, because in the field of alchemy, the reverse pill was publicly known to be lost in the passage of time. Even if he had spent a large sum of money to purchase the incomplete formula, this incomplete formula had actually been inferred by many alchemists before. They had all attempted to restore the complete formula, but had not succeeded. If he managed to produce the complete pill, then his status in the world of alchemists would ascend to a whole new level. What a joke! Previously, he had still been reluctant to show the incomplete formula to Ling Han. Now wasn't reality practically slapping him in the face? The old man's face turned very red when he thought of this. Zhu Hexian gave a humph and said, "Old man Zhang, are you happy now?" He was still a little upset at what had occurred previously. He. Zhang Weishan laughed, slightly embarrassed. His hands grasped onto the pill formula as if it was some kind of ultimate treasure. Ling Han walked out of the residence and said, "I'm going now." "Many thanks, young friend." Zhang Weishan quickly ran over. Once he knew that Ling Han was currently staying at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he did not feel any rush to immediately repair the relationship between himself and Ling Han. Moreover, he also needed a little time to adapt. Ling Han nodded. After he stepped out of the residence, he strolled around. Hey, you are really ungenerous." Qi Zhantai rushed over, an expression of rebuke on her face. Ling Han smiled and asked, "In what way am I ungenerous?" "You obviously are not Grandmaster Zhu's disciple, and caused me to embarrass myself," she said in reproach. Previously, she had even said that she would become Ling Han's elder sister disciple and would take care of Ling Han in future. She had never thought that this guy was so awesome that even Duanmu Changfeng would be driven off because of him. "I never said I was. It was you who thought I was." Ling Han shook his head. "I don't care, you have to compensate me," Qi Zhantai said shamelessly. "Then how do you want me to compensate you?" Ling Han asked. Qi Zhantai tilted her head, thought for a while, then said, "I haven't thought of it yet, so you'll owe me first." "Oh, right, are you here to participate in the Deyuan tournament?" "That's right." Ling Han nodded. "Then I'll kindly give you some exclusive behind-the-scenes information," Qi Zhantai said. "There is a considerable number of elites that have arrived to participate in the tournament this time. My 4th elder brother, of course, will be able to get first place. Aside from him, there is also Li Dongyu from the Stone Wolf sect. Apparently, he's also in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and he's mastered the yellow-grade martial arts technique, Little Tianyuan Hands. Even my 4th elder brother has given him a very high appraisal. In the previous Deyuan tournament he got the 5th place. And there's also the 3rd son of the Jin clan, Jin Wuji. He's also a freakishly talented guy. He's mastered the Jin Yang Palm of their Jin clan. He's rumored to also have 2 flashes of Palm Chi, and in the previous tournament he was 6th. And there's, let me think for a moment, an exceptional genius came from Fuyang Town. His name is Xia Zhongguang. He's only 18 this year, and he's already in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. He's terrifyingly powerful in battle, and my 4th elder brother says he has the ability to enter the top 5. Right, there's also an amazing guy from Eternal River Town. What was his name again? Louis? No, was it Lu Yu, or Lu something? He's also 18 years old, and in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. He also has the ability to enter the top 5. The last is the youngest son of the sect master of Bailey sect, Bailey Tingyun. Apparently, he's just in the 7th layer of element gathering tier, but my 4th elder brother says that this guy is extraordinary, and his prowess is nowhere beneath Li Dongyu. The girl's 4th elder brother was Qi Yongyi, the one with the nickname King of Eternal Night. He was extremely talented and very powerful, so much that even Lu Yutong had exclaimed in admiration. Although Ling Han was confident in himself, he would not be arrogant. It was just that he had too many trump cards in his hands, and he really could not think of anyone who could fight with him on even footing in the whole element gathering tier. Or at least, he could not think of anyone like that in this small Deyuan city. He nodded and said, "Thank you for your inside information. Oh, right, 4th elder brother is hosting a feast tomorrow night. Why don't you come as well?" Qi Zhantai said. "Only those martial artists who have a chance of getting into the top 50 in the Deyuan tournament this time have been invited." Ling Han could not hold back a smile, and said, "Your elder brother is attracting the support of the people here. You're clever." Qi Zhantai did not deny it. If Qi Yongyi intended to obtain the position of Deyuan king in future, he needed to start gathering his support. It would not necessarily be the one who's extremely talented or very powerful that would obtain this royal position. It depended on one's popularity as well. If no one in the royal house was willing to support you, how would you be able to ascend to this position? Although 4th elder brother is extremely talented in the field of martial arts, eldest brother has built up his support through painstaking effort over the duration of more than 10 years. Additionally, eldest brother's mother is the daughter of the Lu clan head. So with the support and favor of the Lu clan, who would emerge victorious in the end is still uncertain. The young girl had curled her hands into fists, her face full of excitement, as if she wanted nothing more than for the two brothers to immediately start fighting, and allow her to spectate it to her heart's content. Aside from the king's house, there were 4 other great parties in Deyuan City that could not be underestimated. They were respectively the Stone Wolf sect, Bailey sect, Jin clan and Lu clan. With the close relationship he had with the Lu clan, the eldest prince really had a big advantage in the battle for the king's position. Ling Han only thought about it for a short while before pushing it to the back of his mind. What did this battle for the king's position have to do with him? Qi Zhantai kept chattering on and on, bothering Ling Han for a very long while, before she finally let him go. However, when she turned around, she revealed a very crafty smile, and murmured, 4th elder brother, I've introduced a very capable helper to you. You must not mess things up." Ling Han was someone whom even Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan addressed as young friend. So he must definitely have an astonishing ability in the field of alchemy. If Qi Yongyi was able to obtain Ling Han's aid, then there would definitely be innumerable martial artists willing to join him. For no other reason but for the sake of alchemical pills. When a martial artist cultivated, he would definitely need the aid of alchemical pills to support his cultivation. And if there was a high-grade alchemist overseeing things in the party, then it would naturally be very attractive to all martial artists. Ling Han naturally saw through the little girl's plot, but he did not think too much of it. He really did want to take a look at this Qi Yongyi, and see how much of a genius he was. On the second day, Ling Dongxing went with Ling Han to register. The participants for the Deyuan tournament were only limited to the local area, so there was a need to provide proof of identification to go through a strict check, because this concerned the enrollment quota for the Huyang Academy. There were 36 cities in Rain Country, and it was impossible for them all to have the same average level of martial arts. Some were higher and some were lower. As a result, a martial artist who had only obtained the 60th position in a tournament in a city with a higher level of martial arts would be able to obtain the 40th position in a tournament in a city with a lower level of martial arts. Then wouldn't they all race over to a weaker city to participate in the tournament to be able to qualify for a place of enrollment in Huyang Academy? The people of Deyuan City could only take part in the Deyuan tournament, and the people from other cities too could not come over to participate. In this manner, everyone protected their own territory. There was a large number of people queuing up to register, and the queue was very long. Ling Han calmly joined the queue. He had already discarded the noble status of a martial artist in heaven tier he had possessed in his last life. Everything had begun anew, and he was setting out from the level of an ordinary man. There was nothing wrong with queuing up. After about 2 hours, it was almost his turn. There was only one person left in front of him. But it was at this moment that a young man escorted by 4 robust men in black forced the others in the queue aside. The 5 of them came to the registration point and directly cut into the queue in front of Ling Han. "Hey, join the queue at the back!" Ling Han frowned and said in displeasure. "En?" The young man turned to look at Ling Han and broke into laughter. With an expression filled with disbelief, he said, "You actually want me to queue up? Do you know who I am?" Chapter 58. Chapter 58, Chief Butler. "I don't care who you are, get back to the end of the line." Ling Han spoke coldly. "Ha ha!" The young man laughed raucously, as if he had heard the greatest joke in the world. He shook his head. "You don't know who I am? I am Jin Wuxiang. My elder brother is Jin Wuji." Jin Wuji, that was one of the strongest competitors in this round of the Deyuan tournament. No wonder this guy was so arrogant. As a young master of the Jin clan and with a very powerful elder brother, he did have the right to behave recklessly. Unfortunately, the one he had encountered now was Ling Han. "Who cares if you're Jin Wuxiang or Jin Wuji? Whoever you are, get back to the end of the line." Ling Han gave an impatient wave of his hand. The smile on Jin Wuxiang's disappeared, replaced by an angered expression. After this brat found out who he was, he still dared to talk back to him? He gave a humph and said, "It is beneath me to lower myself to the level of a minor character like you." He turned back around, and was about to begin the registration process. "Get lost!" Ling Han stretched out a hand, took hold of Jin Wuxiang's shoulder, pulled back and shwa! The guy was flung out of the line. "Pun!" He crashed into the wall and slid down with a groan. He immediately grimaced in pain. "Young Master Wuxiang!" The 4 men in black hurried forward to help Jin Wuxiang up. Yet Ling Han did not even afford him a glance, and said, "I would like to register." When he looked at the man responsible for registering the participants, a faintly surprised expression appeared on his face, because this ordinary-looking old man was actually an elite martial artist in Gushing Spring Tier. "Bastard, you actually dare to make a move against me, and still want to pretend that nothing has happened?" Jin Wuxiang shoved away the 4 robust men and strode forwards, his eyes spitting fire. He was the one and only 6th young master of the Jin clan and the younger brother of Jin Wuji, yet someone actually dared to disrespect him? "Get lost!" Ling Han said coldly. "Who do you think you are, to actually be so bold to disrespect me?" Jin Wuxiang said furiously, stretching out a hand to take hold of Ling Han. "Why are you making a racket here?" The old man who was in charge of registering the participants said, very displeased. "Old guy, you dare interfere with my business?" Jin Wuxiang immediately gave a humph and glared at the old man. He was used to being arrogant, plus he was currently furious, and thus he did not give his actions a second thought. Ling Han could not help shaking his head internally. This guy really was seeking his own demise. Hee, every generation of the Jin clan is weaker than the last. The brats now are becoming more and more thoughtless. The old man sighed. He stretched out his right hand and gave it a flick. Pun! A Herculean strength rushed forth, and Jin Wuxiang directly flew out of the registration room due to the resulting shock wave. When the old man made a move, everyone finally realized in shock that this was actually a powerful elite martial artist. All of their faces were filled with astonishment. Who would have thought that an old man who was in charge of recording and registering the participants would actually be an elite martial artist laying low? "I know who the senior is, he's the chief butler of the royal house of the Deyuan King." "What, the chief butler of the royal house of the Deyuan King? How come he's personally doing this kind of work?" "You asked me, but whom should I ask?" Someone recognized the identity of this old man, immediately causing a bout of whispering amongst the witnesses. Meanwhile, Jin Wuxiang, who had intended to avenge himself, immediately became well-behaved. Although the Jin clan was powerful, it was nothing compared to the power of the royal house of the Deyuan king. No matter how arrogant and overbearing he was not a fool. He knew what kind of people he could trifle with, and what kind of people he shouldn't even think about trifling with. He quickly fled with his tail between his legs, followed by his 4 lackeys. After all, the registration deadline was the day after tomorrow, so there was no need for him to register today no matter what. However, Ling Han had become the target of his grudge. If it wasn't for his interference, there wouldn't have been any dispute about his cutting into the queue at all. "Many thanks for your fair judgment, senior," Ling Han said, raising his clasped hands in gratitude. This was an elite and gushing spring tier, and compared to the current him, the old man was much more powerful. Additionally, he had already let go of the identity of his last life as a powerful warrior of heaven tier and the Alchemy Emperor. There was nothing inappropriate about addressing the old man senior. The old man had a bit of a blurred vision, and he smiled at Ling Han and said, "To be able to break through to the element gathering tier at such a young age, such talent is really promising. My 7th young mistress is about the same age as you, so there might be chances of a match there." When everyone heard this, they could not help the weird expressions plastered on their faces. Was this chief butler here to seek a prince consort for the royal house? However, it was impossible for a princess's marriage to be decided by a butler. At most, the chief butler could only be responsible for the first round of selections. Whether the candidate passed or not would still be decided by the Deyuan king. Even so, everyone sat up and took notice of Ling Han. To be able to gain the recognition of an elite of gushing spring tier, this brat must have had some outstanding quality. Yet Ling Han pondered and recalled, 7th young mistress, wasn't that Qijan Tai, that young girl? He laughed loudly and said, "Many thanks for your recognition, senior, but we should complete the registration process first." This brat really was quite bold to actually dare reject the chief butler in this manner. Yet the chief butler was all smiles. He was only under the command of the Deyuan king to see if there were any outstanding geniuses in this round of the Deyuan tournament. It was definitely not possible that Ling Han would become the son-in-law of the royal house just because he had taken a fancy to him. "Good, where are you from, how old are you, what is your cultivation level and what is your name?" he asked. "I am Ling Han, I came from Grey Cloud Town. After the new year, I'll be 17, and I am currently in the 4th layer of element gathering tier." Ling Han replied to each question with a smile. "Pooh!" The eyeballs of those who were close enough to hear his reply were in danger of popping out of their heads, as if they had seen some kind of ghost. Many of them had already seen that Ling Han was in element gathering tier. Those who were not able to were clued into the fact by the words of the chief butler. But when they saw how young Ling Han was, they had all thought that he had just broken through. At most, he could only be at the peak period of the 1st layer of element gathering tier. Yet Ling Han was shockingly in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. A 17-year-old in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. This was absolutely astonishing. Even for the genius that was the 4th prince, with the endless cultivation resources supplied by the royal house, had he managed to reach the 4th layer of element gathering tier at 17 years old? Perhaps he had, but that was the farthest he could have ventured. With such a comparison, they could now easily see how freakishly talented Ling Han was. No wonder the chief butler wanted to enlist him as a prince consort candidate. Ling Han took out his proof of identification. This was something that every citizen of Rain Country would receive upon their birth. For those who did not have this kind of proof of identification, if they were discovered, they would either become slaves or would be forced to flee from the country. The chief butler only gave it a brief glance, and then gave a plaque to Ling Han. This was the plaque that would allow Ling Han to participate in the Deyuan tournament that would be held 2 days after tomorrow. Usually, no one would dare to falsify their identity. This was because once you managed to squeeze into the top 50, there would be a second check to verify your identity. If it was discovered that anyone had dared to falsify their identity, this was definitely a very heavy crime. The chief butler was very interested in Ling Han, and kept chatting with him about ordinary, daily life. He really seemed as if he intended to marry off his own daughter to Ling Han. Although everyone else was starting to feel impatient, no one dared to rush him in any way. Even without his esteemed position as the chief butler of the royal house of the Yuan king, as an elite martial artist in gushing spring tier, he was undeniably a powerful presence within the nearest 1,000 miles. It wasn't until Ling Han finally voiced his intention to leave of his own accord that the chief butler ended the conversation. Yet he still told Ling Han that if he was free, he was welcome to visit the royal house of the Yuan king, which caused everyone else to turn red-eyed with envy. This was the same as giving a protective charm to Ling Han. Who would dare make a move against him now? Chapter 59. Chapter 59, Attending the Feast. Because the registration process took too long, Ling Dongxing and his son had their lunch before returning to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. After resting for a while, it was about close to nighttime. After Ling Han and Lu Yutong made slight preparations, they set off towards the residence of the fourth prince to attend the dinner banquet. The residence of the fourth prince was only one street away from the royal house of the Yuan king, so the two residences were really very close. However, out of the many children of the Yuan king, only two had gained the privilege of possessing their own individual residences: the first prince and the fourth prince. The first prince, Shi Yongxing, had displayed his outstanding qualities from birth. With his extraordinary talent, as well as the fact he was the eldest son of the first wife of the Yuan king, he had naturally long firmly established his identity as the heir. But with the sudden emergence of the powerful fourth prince, he was currently under a great threat. Now, the position of the heir that he had maintained for so long appeared to be facing imminent danger. As a result, the competition between the two princes was getting more and more turbulent, and becoming more and more of a dilemma to the various parties as they wondered which prince they should support. If the prince they supported ascended gloriously to the royal position, that would be great, as their own status would then be raised accordingly as well. But if the prince they supported failed? When a new king is crowned, he brings to court his own favorites, and expels those he disliked. The new king would definitely pay them back for their previous lack of support. Ling Han and Lu Yutong did not travel by carriage. Instead, they walked to the residence of the fourth prince. At the door, there were many guards stationed, helping to welcome the incoming guests. "Excuse me, please show us your invitation, the two of you." When a guard saw the two of them approach, he walked over and blocked them from advancing further. "Invitation?" Ling Han startled. He did not have this kind of thing, as Qijan Tai had only issued him a verbal invitation. He said, "I'm Ling Han, and I should be on the name list for guests." "Then I apologize. Those without an invitation will not be allowed to enter," the guard said solemnly. "Has that little girl, Qijan Tai, played a trick on him?" Ling Han could not help thinking thus. "Ha ha ha, you dare to come here without an invitation," a taunting voice said. A young man stepped down from a carriage. He was dressed in luxurious formal attire, making him look very flashy. He was Jin Wuxiang, and just before noon, he had even had an argument with Ling Han. "Village boy, this here is the residence of the fourth prince, not a place anyone can simply enter freely." Jin Wuxiang laughed coldly. He then removed a gold-colored invitation from the folds of his clothes, proudly waved it around and said, "Look here clearly, this is the invitation. But a minor character like you will never receive this kind of thing in your life." He really was too pleased. At noon, because of the dread he felt towards the chief butler, he could only choose to flee with his tail between his legs. But since he has met Ling Han here at this moment, this was an opportunity gifted by heavens for him to avenge himself. Haha, he really must properly humiliate this guy, before killing him. Ling Han could not help shaking his head. This guy was only in the 9th layer of body refining tier, so where did his feeling of superiority come from? And he kept attracting aggression for his clan. If he encountered any elite martial artist with a bad temper, that could also possibly lead to difficulties for his clan. "What are you still standing around here for? Do you think that if you stand here long enough, you'll be pitted and allowed in dash?" Jean Wuxiang continued to sneer in derision, but once his eyes swept over Lu Yutong, his eyes could no longer remove themselves from her figure. He had only just now realized Lu Yutong's presence, and was instantly captivated by this icy beauty. He could only feel the rapidly increasing pace of his heartbeat, and the boiling of the blood in his veins. Brat, you dash! Pun! Jean Wuxiang had only just opened his mouth when Ling Han gave a heavy blow to his face, and his whole body was instantly flung away. This kind of prodigal young master would definitely have nothing nice to say, so Ling Han made a preemptive strike to avoid filth from entering his ears. You hit me again? Jean Wuxiang crawled up from the ground. He was full of grievances. Within this one day, he had been hit by Ling Han twice. He was the 6th young master of the Jin clan. When had he ever received such treatment? If you don't want to be hit a 3rd time, get lost! Ling Han gave a flick of his hand. How dare you? Are you really so tired of living? Jean Wuxiang's eyes were spitting fire, and he said to the guards around them. You have all seen it, right? This guy actually dared to beat up a guest of the 4th prince. Are you not going to apprehend him? This guy was not stupid. He knew how to take advantage of the situation. Master Ling, please cooperate! One of the guards stepped out. You must come with us! Although all of them knew that the 6th young master of the Jin clan was a standard prodigal young master, and there were 100 times more people in the city that disliked him than those who liked him, this was the residence of the 4th prince. How could others be allowed to act impertinently in this place? Jean Wuxiang could not help feeling very proud of himself. He was feeling extremely superior because of his own cleverness. See, who was the one who said he'd be nothing without his clan? Hey, what's the commotion here all about? A young girl dressed in courtly attire walked out, hands behind her back and a crafty expression on her face. It was Qijan Tai. Greetings, 7th princess! All of the guards hurriedly saluted. Rise! The young girl raised her hand in a mature, experienced manner. When she looked at Ling Han, she deliberately put on a surprised expression and said, Why are you still outside? Ling Han understood now. The girl had purposely not issued him an invitation just to see a good show. As a result, she must have waited near the door, and naturally had witnessed the conflict between Ling Han and Jean Wuxiang. She could have already stepped out early on to stop it, but had only stepped out now. This showed that this girl was the kind of person that desired to see the world in chaos. When they heard her words, the guards naturally realized that Ling Han was truly one of the guests tonight, so there was no longer any need to bother about little details like why he did not have an invitation. And since the 7th princess has already spoken, they could not possibly still intend to apprehend Ling Han. Master Ling, apologies for our lacking manners, all the guards said in unison to Ling Han. Ling Han only gave Qijan Tai a stern gaze, but the girl did not feel scared at all. She stuck out her tongue at him and quickly ran over to Lu Yutong and said, Wah, big sister, you're very beautiful. Meanwhile, Jean Wuxiang was infuriated half to death. It seemed like he was a hideous person doing mischief, seeking his own humiliation. His eyes focused on Ling Han, and he naturally thought that Ling Han had clung on to Qijan Tai for her power and influence. And when he recalled that Ling Han still had an extraordinarily beautiful maiden by his side, he immediately realized this guy was a master at picking up girls, and was a professional at living off women. When he thought in this way, he looked even further down at Ling Han. Many thoughts ran through his mind, like how could he kill Ling Han and avenge himself. Just when his thoughts took a venomous turn, he saw Ling Han walk over to him. He could not help straightening up into a pompous stance and said, You want to make peace with me now? It's too late. I will definitely dash. Pa! He received a firm, solid slap, and was completely dumbfounded. He, the one and only 6th young master of the Jin clan, had actually been slapped in a public setting. What great shame and humiliation was this? And all around them, whether it was Qijan Tai, the guards, or the guests who had arrived subsequently, they could not help gasping when they saw this scene. If a conflict happened amongst the younger generation, it was fine and a normal thing. None of the older generation of the clans would make a move because of this. But even if you beat anyone up, never aim for the face. This was not only an embarrassment to Jin Wuxiang, but also the Jin clan behind him. Even the first prince or the fourth prince would not slap Jin Wuxiang impulsively, unless the latter had really done something extremely foolish and idiotic. Who did Ling Han think he was to actually dare to do such a thing? Chapter 60. Chapter 60, Sitting Up High. Ling Han was a man of simple principles. If you do not bother me, then I will not bother you either. But if you dare to mess with me, then you should be well prepared to suffer my wrath. You've messed with me several times now, do you really think I'm an easy target? He asked coldly. Jin Wuxiang really felt like he wanted to weep himself to death. At noontime, it was he who had been flung out, and now, it was also he who had been slapped. All these times, it was he who was on the losing side, okay. And you still dare to say all this? There's no such logic in this world. Of course, he would definitely not reflect on the fact that it was he who had provoked Ling Han intentionally at both occasions. You can be proud however you want now, but when my elder brother comes later, you'll suffer, Jin Wuxiang said harshly. He believed that his elder brother would definitely avenge him later. Pa! 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 Ling Han gave him 3, 4 consecutive slaps. There was no sign that he had taken Jin Wuxiang's threat seriously. I'll be waiting. With these last words, Ling Han, Liu Tong and Qijan Tai entered the prince's residence together. How come you're even more of a troublemaker than I am? The 7th princess sighed in a sorrowful manner. You've really caused a disaster now. That was a brat from the Jin clan. Although he himself is not worthy of respect, his elder brother is Jin Wuji. Haven't I told you how powerful Jin Wuji is? And yet you still dare to provoke him. I have to quickly inform Master, and ask him to clean up the mess for you. I'm not going to get implicated in this. Ling Han gave a light rap to her head, and said, If you hadn't harbored evil intentions, and had not failed to issue me an invitation, how would there have been so many problems? What evil intentions? You must not wrong an innocent person. Qijan Tai quickly shook her head vigorously, looking like a rattledrum. She was definitely not going to admit to such a crime. I had just forgotten. Forgotten, okay? Big Sister Lu, don't you agree with me? She asked Liu Tong, acting like a spoiled child. Liu Tong maintained her cool demeanor, causing Qijan Tai's eyes to light up. She really felt that this big sister was an individual with quite a personality. The 3 of them arrived at the main hall. There was close to 100 tables here, but they weren't the usual round tables. Instead, they were minuscule long tables, which at most would be able to accommodate 2 people at a time. This setting allowed each guest their own table. If they had brought a companion, then it wouldn't be too much of a tight fit for 2 people to sit at one table. These tables were arranged in rows of 5, from the doorway of the main hall and further in. Obviously, the further in your table was, the higher your status was. Currently, most of the tables were occupied. Aside from an empty table in the first row, the other empty tables were all arranged after the 10th row. Just find some place to sit, Qijan Tai said, the corners of her lips lifting up slightly to reveal a crafty smile. She had posed a difficult problem to Ling Han, as she wanted to see where this guy would choose to sit. It was difficult because there was only one empty table at the front, but this was the first row, and only the strongest of the younger generation had the right to sit there. Ling Han's cultivation level was obviously still far from this level. But if Ling Han obediently went to sit at the back, this showed that he did not have much ambition and would capitulate easily. Yet Ling Han did not ponder much about this so-called difficult problem. He only gave a short nod, and without thinking much, headed to the first row. Although he had let go of the glory of his last life, he still possessed the heart of an elite warrior. Since there was an empty space in the first row, he would naturally choose to sit there. Qijan Tai stuck out her tongue, and thought that there would be a good show to watch soon. But she did not overstep her limits. She quickly commanded a servant to go forth to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion to inform Zhang Weishan. Otherwise, if things became too much to handle, it would not be easily ended. Seeing Ling Han stride towards the front, those who had already occupied their seats all revealed shocked expressions, as they all thought the same thing. Who is this guy? Looks like he's going to sit in the front row. But out of the 5 tables in the first row, 4 were already occupied. The last empty table also actually had an owner. It's just that he hadn't arrived yet. It belonged to Jin Wuji. Was this guy an idiot? He even dared to steal Jin Wuji's table? Interesting. The 4 people who were already seated in the first row all smiled. Some of them wore mocking smiles, while there were some who were genuinely smiling in curiosity, wondering whether this brat was an arrogant fool or someone who had real power to back it up. However, very soon their gazes became focused on Lu Yutong. This young girl was really too beautiful. Though she seemed a little cold, this was also a kind of temperament. Moreover, she was very strong. Could it be that she was the master, and the brat in front was only her attendant? It was more logical to think this way. PFFF. The 4 of them almost choked, because they saw Ling Han sit down boldly while Lu Yutong sat at his side. With this, who was the master and who was the attendant was easily seen. It was really inconceivable. Such an extraordinarily beautiful and extremely powerful maiden could only be seated at this brat's side. Who exactly was he? He must be the heir to some great clan. Otherwise, he would not have dared to take Jin Wuji's table. Ha ha ha, I've made you all wait! Clear laughter was heard all of a sudden as a tall, thin man strode out of the inside door of the main hall. He had a majestic gait, presenting a kingly visage. This was not a ruler in terms of power, but in terms of a kind of confidence in himself. Greetings, 4th Prince! Everyone stood from their seats. Now that the host was here, the guests would of course have to stand up and pay due respects. The 4th Prince had a table of his own, and his table was the furthermost in front. Moreover, he sat facing the doorway, while the others sat facing the walls. Sit, everyone, please be seated. The 4th Prince, Chiyongye's eyes swept over his guests, and when he discovered an unfamiliar face in the first row, he could not help feeling startled. Who might this be? Why had he taken Jin Wuji's table? But his gaze quickly spotted Lu Yutong, and his heart was stirred. He also belonged to the Huyang Academy, so he naturally recognized Lu Yutong to be a noble daughter of the Lu clan, yet she actually sat at Ling Han's side. How could Shi Yongyi not experience a great shock at this? But he was still the 4th Prince, and so was naturally very shrewd. There was no change in the expression on his face, though his eyes had still stayed on Lu Yutong's figure for a few moments longer. This did not attract the suspicion of others, because this was a normal occurrence. She was so beautiful that any man would want to stare at her for a moment longer. Let me introduce to you. Chiyongyi revealed a smile, confident and calm, displaying fully his royal air. He pointed at the first person seated at the first table towards the left in the first row. This is Li Dongyu, Brother Li. He's the personally taught disciple of the sect master of Stone Wolf sect. Brother Li, it has been a long time. You're about to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, right? Li Dongyu laughed heartily and said, 4th Prince, you should not tease me. Even you have not broken through to Gushing Spring Tier. How is it possible that I would be qualified to? Brother Li is really too modest. Chiyongyi pointed at the second person towards the left. This is Bailey Tingyun, the son of the sect master of Bailey sect. Bailey Tingyun was extremely young. He seemed to be only about 17 or 18 years old. He was a little cool, only giving a light HN as greeting. Chiyongyi did not take it to heart, and continued his round of introductions. Next is Xia Zhongguang, Brother Xia. He came from Fuyang Town, and he's only 18 years old. He did not participate in the previous Diyuan tournament, but I believe that he will definitely show extraordinary talent in this tournament. This is Lu Yu, Brother Lu. Like Brother Xia, he's also 18 years old, and I am very optimistic about his upcoming performance. And the last dash. Chiyongye's gaze stopped on Ling Han's figure, and his words paused. He did not continue to speak, because he did not know how to continue. However, he did not feel the slightest bit awkward. Instead, he only smiled and looked at Ling Han expectantly, as if waiting for Ling Han to introduce himself. He could also admit that he himself was curious about Ling Han's identity. Who exactly was he to be able to have the noble daughter of the Lu clan serve by his side? Chapter 61. Chapter 61. The first prince has arrived. I am Ling Han. Ling Han stood up, offered a faint smile, and then sat back down. Was that all? Ling clan? Which great clan was that? Everyone was very curious. There was no Ling clan in the 8 great clans of the imperial city. Could it be that the Ling clan was a great clan from some other city? That was possible, because there were 36 great cities in Rain country, and there was a number of great clans in each city. That brought the total of great clans in the whole country to over 100, who could say with certainty that they knew all of them. However, the most surprised was definitely Qi Yongyi. He was the only one who knew Lu Yutong's real identity. To be able to have a princess of the Lu clan wait upon him, what kind of colossal existence could this Ling clan be? Whatever it was, he still had to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Qi Yongyi was an expert at manipulating the mood, and very quickly, everyone's attention was again focused on him. There was a round of laughter in the main hall, as everyone felt that this prince really had a unique charm, causing many of them to be of a mind to swear loyalty under his banner. Announcing the arrival of the first prince. It was at this very moment that a loud shout was heard from outside. The first prince has arrived? Everyone was extremely shocked. Who didn't know that the first prince and the fourth prince were currently embroiled in a fierce competition for the king's position? Why had he suddenly come here? Fourth brother! Very soon, the first prince appeared at the doorway of the main hall. He was a very handsome man in his 30s. He had a tall and sturdy figure with an exceptional bearing. He was all smiles as he took great strides towards Qi Yongyi, looking nothing like a rival or enemy of the latter. Qi Yongyi stood and walked forwards to greet the first prince. He was also all smiles as he said, "Eldest brother, what are you doing here?" When the two of them neared each other, they both tacitly stopped their advance. They both watched each other with smiles, yet neither had any intention of extending their arms to embrace the other in greeting. My fourth brother is hosting a banquet. I, as the eldest brother, must of course come to show my support, the first prince said, smiling. Qi Yongyi could not help but frown slightly at this. The reason he was hosting this banquet was to gain the will of the people to gather support for when he ascends to the position of the king in the future. There was no way that the first prince did not know this. Then the reason he was here was obvious. He was here to ruin things for him. Then I'll thank you, eldest brother, he said in a very false manner, though his face still wore a dazzling smile. The first prince paused and said, I've also brought a noble guest with me. Oh, and who might that be? Qi Yongyi asked. He knew that the first prince would not have come just to show his face. The latter would definitely have a more substantial move planned. Brother Gua, please! The first prince called in the direction of the doorway. Everyone turned to take a look at the first prince's noble guest, and saw a young man in gray walk in. He was of medium height and his features were very ordinary, but when they saw the badge that hung on his chest, there was a slight change in all of their expressions. Yellow-grade medium-level alchemist. Alchemists were an existence that would be welcomed anywhere, as well as an existence that no self-respecting party could lack. If a party possessed the aid and support of an alchemist, then to individual cultivators, or even smaller powers, this party would be very attractive as an ally. Martial artists were too dependent on alchemical medicines. Fourth brother, let me introduce to you. This here is Guiding Quan, Brother Gua, and he's a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist. And Brother Gua's master is even more impressive. He is the one and only Grand Master Duanmu, who has been acclaimed as one who excels in both sword skill and alchemy. The first prince wore a dazzling smile, and was feeling very cheerful. On the other hand, Qi Yongyi felt a bitter taste on his tongue. He knew that the first prince was here to ruin things, and unfortunately it seemed like he was going to succeed. The fact that Guiding Quan was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist was not the main point. The crux of the matter was that his master, Duanmu Changfeng, was an actual black-grade low-level alchemist. Although currently the first prince was only close with Guodingquan, but a disciple could also in a sense represent the master's partiality. The first prince was issuing a signal to everyone. He had a very good relationship with Duan Muchang Feng and has obtained the latter's support. This definitely added a very heavy bargaining chip to his pile, while also being a very heavy blow to Qi Yongyi. The weight of an alchemist was too much. "Brother Gua!" Qi Yongyi said in greeting, still maintaining a wide smile. He could not chase the first prince and Guodingquan away, or rumors would definitely spread, saying that he was a petty character. As a person who was seated in the upper echelons of society, he definitely had to present himself as a generous man. If he couldn't do even this small thing, then what right did he have to inherit the position of the king? Guodingquan was very arrogant. Even towards the fourth prince's greeting, he only replied with a "hn." He was really displaying an all-out arrogance and pride of an alchemist. This profession was really too scarce, so all alchemists were treated with utmost respect and as a result, completely spoiled. "Brother Gua, please sit!" Qi Yongyi was secretly angered, but still displayed a very polite demeanor. Guodingquan's eyes swept over the scene, before walking forwards in a straight line. If he was sitting, then he was naturally going to sit in the first row. Otherwise, how could he preserve his pride? Because all the tables here were arranged 5 in one row, and there was not much of a gap in between tables, so on both sides, there was a very wide aisle. So, Guodingquan could only choose to walk up the left aisle, or the right aisle. The unfortunate thing was that he chose to walk straight up the left aisle, and arrived at Ling Han's table. But whether or not it was because he had spotted Lu Yutong, that was something that only he himself knew. "You can get lost now," he said coldly. How overbearing. The first thing he said upon opening his mouth was to tell someone else to get lost. Did he really think he was the emperor? However, he himself was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, while his master was a black-grade alchemist, so he really did have the confidence to be so overbearing. Ling Han smiled. In the eyes of others, this meant that he was apparently going to give in to Guodingquan's overbearing demand, but Lu Yutong knew that it was the exact opposite. Ling Han was angry. Not only that, he was very angry. He said, "Why don't you try saying that again? Get lost! Get lost! Get lost!" Guodingquan naturally did not feel scared of this subtle threat. He not only said it again, he even emphasized his demand 3 times. A coldness flashed through Ling Han's eyes. In an instant, his hand flashed out, taking hold of Guodingquan's neck. With a harsh tug and a ping, Guodingquan's face was instantly pressed firmly onto the table. The shock wave of his face meeting the table caused the wine jar to topple over, and immediately, wine splashed all over his face. Wu dash! Guodingquan was firmly pressed down onto the table, and he started struggling vigorously, intending to get out of Ling Han's hold. Yet it was all pointless effort. The main hall was dead silent. This guy was really too great, he even dared to hit an alchemist. Everyone sucked their breath in shock. He had balls, he was a real man. The first prince was initially startled, before suddenly erupting in fury. He never imagined that someone would actually dare to beat up Guodingquan. Initially, his aura had completely overwhelmed Qi Yongyi, but with this show of force, Guodingquan was not the only one who had lost his face. He was also embarrassed. He strode quickly towards Ling Han and his right hand flashed out, intending to grab onto Ling Han's neck, shouting, "I command you to release him!" Shwa! A strong wind blew past, and Lu Yutong had already acted, blocking the first prince's action. The first prince was stunned by her beauty at first, but immediately his gaze regained focus. Everything could be sacrificed for the king's position, and Guodingquan was a trump card that decided whether or not he could defeat the fourth prince, thus he could not allow any problems to emerge. "Step down!" he shouted. He did not counterattack immediately because he did not want to harm such a beautiful maiden if he could avoid it. Lu Yutong only gave a wave of her hand, and said, "Get lost! Get lost!" She actually told the first prince to get lost, she was indeed extremely daring. When Qi Yongyi saw this, he could not help smiling. He was the only one who knew that Lu Yutong was a noble daughter of the Lu clan. If the first prince offended her, that was definitely not anything good for him. But while this would be a bad thing for the first prince, for himself, this would be a good thing indeed. Chapter 62. Chapter 62, Leaving in Anger. Get lost! With a casual wave of his hand, Guiding was easily flung away by Ling Han, and with a ping, he crashed into the nearest wall. Bastard! Guiding got back to his feet and shouted in a towering rage. He was really about to die from his utmost fury. As an alchemist, someone who was respected and revered by everyone, he had actually been pressed onto a table, wine had splattered all over his face, and he had even been flung away to crash into a wall. Thankfully, dinner had not been served yet. Otherwise, his face would have been even more colorful, decorated by a myriad of dishes. You want to try it again? Ling Han asked coldly. This was not the first alchemist he had thrashed, and definitely wouldn't be the last. I want you to die! Guiding roared furiously. Tang, tang, tang! With heavy steps, he charged over to Ling Han again. As an alchemist, he had never experienced such great shame. If he did not avenge himself, then he could not live with himself. Ling Han moved. Pun! Guiding was once again held by his neck, and as expected, slammed onto the table face first. The difference was that Ling Han had used more strength this time, causing the table to be broken in half by the force. Ah dash! Veins were protruding all over Guiding face in his anger, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit out fire. However, he did not charge a second time, because he had finally sensed that the gap between Ling Han and himself was far too wide. Damn it, based on aura, Ling Han could only be about the same level as he himself was. At most, they were both in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, but why was he so strong? He turned his head to look at the first prince. The latter was stuck in a confrontation with Lu Yutong, so could not possibly assist him at this time. He raised his voice and said, Whoever helps me thrash this brat, I will gift him with 10 embracing origin pills. What, embracing origin pill? For anyone below the 9th layer of element gathering tier, this is a valuable treasure. It can help one in the formation of the origin nucleus and increase the chances of success by about 30%. To give out 10 pills in one go, what opulence! Everyone was discussing this spiritedly, but there were not many who were really interested in taking up Guiding offer, because who amongst those invited was not a genius? For a genius, if they even had to depend on external support just to form their origin nucleus, what right did they have to the name of genius? When Guiding saw this, he could not help grit his teeth and finally announced, An earth and fire pill! Damn, an earth and fire pill! This time, everyone could no longer just stay in their seats calmly. Even Qi Yongyi and the first prince seemed tempted by this new offer. The earth and fire pill had similar effects as the purple origin pill. It was also used to help a martial artist break through to the gushing spring tier, but its effects were much weaker than the latter. At most, it could only raise the chance of success by 20%. But still, it was a very rare and extremely valuable spiritual medicine. Even for a genius like Qi Yongyi, he also had been stuck at the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier for over half a year. Normally, if one could manage to break through to gushing spring tier within 3 to 5 years' time, that was already a feat worthy of praise. Meanwhile, the first prince had already reached the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier 7 years ago, yet his cultivation level remained unchanged even until now, showing the extreme difficulty of breaking through to the gushing spring tier. An earth and fire pill could very possibly save quite a few years' time of cultivation for even a genius, so it was extremely valuable. However, although the ingredients required for the concoction of an earth and fire pill were not as costly as the ingredients for a purple origin pill, they were still extremely rare, and while there were many willing to buy, none were willing to sell. Otherwise, with the financial resources available to the royal house of the Deyuan king, they would have been able to afford a few of them. As a result, Everyone immediately turned to stare feverishly at Ling Han, as if he himself was an earth and fire pill. What impudence! What do you people think this place is? Qi Yongyi immediately spoke coldly. He was a man that knew what his role was, so he naturally suppressed the covetousness he felt in his heart. Guidingquan was working for the first prince, so he of course would not bother to assist the former. Moreover, Ling Han had an unknown relationship with Liu Tong, and with this, his position was extremely clear. He'd help Ling Han. With this exclamation from the fourth prince, everyone immediately regained their composure. This was the residence of the fourth prince, and if they dared to come to arms here, then in a sense, it was no different than rebellion. Guidingquan breathed heavily and glared at Qi Yongyi fiercely before suddenly turning around and leaving. There was no way that he could swallow this great offense. He was going to fetch his master. No one could insult an alchemist in this manner. Brother Gua! Brother Gua! The first prince hurriedly called as he chased after Guidingquan's heels. As sudden as the two's arrival was, they left just as suddenly. There was a temporary calm in the main hall. Some of the guests felt sorry for missing out on an opportunity to obtain the earth and fire pill, while some other guests were curious about the future development of this matter. Come, replace the table. Qi Yongyi began to manipulate the atmosphere and once again displayed his personal charm, causing the atmosphere of the banquet to regain its liveliness. All of them were extremely interested in Ling Han. It was not difficult to restrain Guidingquan. In fact, 80% of the people present here would be able to do so easily, but to dare to do so, perhaps only Ling Han possessed such courage. Brother Ling, may I know where do you originate from? Someone finally asked. Grey Cloud Town. Ling Han had no intention of concealing it. After all, since he was intending to participate in the Deyuan tournament, he could not falsify his identity. Grey Cloud Town? All of them gave a start at this. Wasn't that a small place under the jurisdiction of the Deyuan city? Then where did Ling Han get his confidence from? He was not the only one who had made a great display of power, for even the girl beside him appeared to be very proud. She had not even taken the first prince seriously. Qi Yongyi was even more surprised. Ling Han came from Grey Cloud Town. Then how had he developed a relationship with Liu Tong? Even though he himself was of nobility, when compared to Liu Tong, there was still a bit of a gap between them. After all, they could only be considered as one of the branch families of the imperial family, and after so many generations, their relation with the imperial family was not really very close. Unless he could ascend to the position of the Deyuan king, even he would not be qualified to marry Liu Tong. Yet Ling Han could have Liu Tong follow closely by his side. A brat from a tiny little Grey Cloud town, what right did he have to do such a thing? As the various dishes were served, everyone too felt slightly famished, and so began eating. Martial artists expended a lot of energy, and so would become hungry more easily than normal people. Ha ha ha, apologies, apologies. Fourth prince, I've arrived late. A long bout of laughter was heard and a tall, young man walked in. He appeared to be about 20 years old, and had an astonishing aura to him. The third son of the Jin clan, Jin Wuji. Jin Wuxiang followed right behind, imitating the former's steps slavishly. He seemed a bit like a mouse that had seen a cat, and there was absolutely no sign of his prior arrogance. Brother Jin, why are you so late? Qi Yongyi asked, smiling as he stood. I had some trifling matters to deal with, Jin Wuji said, as he continued to walk forwards. Elder brother, that's him. That's him. When they arrived at the first row, Jin Wuxiang immediately called out, as he pointed at Ling Han. Jin Wuji's eyes swept over the first row, and could not hold back an expression of shock from appearing on his face, as he said, Younger sister disciple Lu, what are you doing here? He was also a disciple of Huyang Academy, so he naturally recognized the princess, Liu Tong. Liu Tong only nodded back calmly, and did not make any further response. Jin Wuji knew her personality, so he did not take her cool response to heart. His gaze turned towards Ling Han, and coldness flashed through his eyes immediately. Initially, he had only been a little late, but when he encountered his younger brother at the entrance, and found out what the latter had experienced, he immediately ordered someone to investigate Ling Han. This was not difficult. Since he had already registered, there would definitely be a profile of him in the records. A mere young master from a tiny clan of Grey Cloud Town, and he actually dared to oppose the Jin clan? He definitely did not think that Lu Yutong would actually deign to like Ling Han. Even if she did, the Lu clan would definitely not agree to such a match. This would practically be a great dishonor to the clan. As a result, he did not fear that Lu Yutong would defend Ling Han. Moreover, his power was above Lu Yutong. "Brat, get lost from my seat!" he said coldly. Chapter 63. Chapter 63. Damn, hit the wrong person. Ling Han could not withhold a smile from turning up at the corners of his lips, and said, "Are you sure you want this seat?" This was originally my seat," Jin Wuji said coldly. "Very well, since you want it, then I'll just let you have it." Ling Han stood up very candidly. "Pooh!" Quite a few people exclaimed in surprise. Because there really was too big a difference between what Ling Han was doing now and what he had done just now. Previously, Ling Han had even dared to thrash the disciple of someone who excelled in sword arts and alchemy openly in front of the first prince. Yet, now he was actually scared off. It was inconceivable. It was really inconceivable. They were not the only ones who thought it was inconceivable. Lu Yutong was in complete bewilderment. Ling Han had left a very distinct impression on her. Though he may appear to be utterly calm, he was prouder than anyone else. How was it possible that he would give in to Jin Wuji's demand? If they really had to battle, she was adequate enough to face Jin Wuji. And even if the Jin clan stepped out and interfered, didn't he still have the colossal existence of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion behind him? In the whole of Rain Country, what party would dare to offend Heaven's Medicine Pavilion? None, there were definitely none. Because this huge power did not only exist in Rain Country, but also possessed branches in the 9 countries in the desolate north, so whether it was in terms of power or wealth, it had a terrifying amount of both. Just think, when martial artists cultivate, they would definitely need the support of alchemical pills, and Heaven's Medicine Pavilion was a place where alchemical pills could be sold, so how could there be a lack of elite martial artists willing to act on their behalf? From the reverence and respect Zhu Hexian felt towards Ling Han, he had practically recognized the latter as his teacher. If the Jin clan dared to harm Ling Han, he would definitely unleash the power of the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion branch of Rain Country, and obliterate the Jin clan. Since the facts were as so, then why would he need to fear? Ling Han stretched out an arm and drew Lu Yutong to himself. An enchanting blush instantly appeared on the young girl's beautiful face, and there was absolutely no hint of the icy beauty from before. Damn! When they saw this dazzling, extraordinarily beautiful maiden, everyone was filled with such irrepressible jealousy that their eyes turned red, wanting nothing more than to chop off the arm Ling Han was holding Lu Yutong with. Lu Yutong's mind had completely blanked. She only felt as if she was walking on clouds, and when she followed Ling Han to sit in one of the tables at the row further behind, even though Ling Han had long withdrawn his arm, she still had not regained her senses. Her heart was still rapidly beating. "Just wait and we'll see a good show," Ling Han said softly by her ear. Lu Yutong froze at this and said, "What good show?" Ling Han pouted a bit and said, "Don't forget that was something from just now had gone to get reinforcements." "You're planning to trick Jin Wuji?" Lu Yutong finally understood. Ling Han smiled and said, "I've already asked him if he really wanted that seat, and he himself agreed to it. So what does that have to do with me?" Lu Yutong could not help pursing her lips in a delicate smile, but immediately frowned, and said, "Duan Wuchang Feng couldn't be that hot-headed, right? I bet he has already restrained a whole stomach's worth of anger from yesterday, and when that whatever returned, he'd definitely exaggerate the story, thus the old man's wrath would definitely be extraordinarily large. Moreover, when I was thrashing that whatever, I immediately acted without saying a single word." Ling Han laughed and said, "So, there is a high possibility that the old guy would do something like that. When that Duan Wuchang Feng realizes that he has punished the wrong person, he would definitely focus on you. Lu Yutong's delicate brow wrinkled in a frown. I think that, by that time, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan will have already arrived. However, even if they have not, I have my own ways of dealing with that old man. Ling Han revealed a confident smile, for Zhu Hexian had told about Duanwu Changfeng to him. The old man was praised as one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, and the sword technique that he practiced was sweeping cloud sword arts, a black-grade low-level martial arts technique. However, the old man only managed to learn 7 moves, while the complete sweeping cloud sword arts had a total of 9 moves. The book of sword arts techniques that the old guy managed to get his hands on should be a partially ruined relic, which was why he had not managed to learn the last 2 moves. Coincidentally, Ling Han possessed the complete sweeping cloud sword arts, so no matter from which angle one looked, he had the upper hand in the upcoming confrontation. Lu Yutong has definitely been badly influenced by Ling Han, and she could not withhold an expectant look from appearing on her face. Because of Ling Han's lack of moral backbone, all of the guests felt shame for sharing his company, thus no one else spoke to him. Meanwhile, Jin Wuxiang turned his head repeatedly, displaying a challenging expression to Ling Han. From his expression, he had clearly held disdain for Ling Han as well. He had originally thought that Ling Han would be stubborn, and in that way, his elder brother would definitely have an excuse to heavily injure Ling Han. He had never thought that the guy was the type to bully the weak while fearing the strong. But do you think that you'll be able to escape just like this? Jin Wuxiang humphed coldly in his heart. Once the banquet ended and they had left the residence of the 4th prince, Jin Wuji would definitely act and ruthlessly teach Ling Han a lesson. They still had to give face to the 4th prince. Ling Han's capitulation was something that even Qi Yongyi had not thought would happen, so he too grew disdainful of Ling Han. As a result, he did not bother to waste any more time on Ling Han, and went on with his original plans, starting to persuade the other guests in hope that everyone invited would agree to support him. Master, that's him. Not long after, a voice filled with fury was heard. Guoding Quan had once again appeared at the entry to the main hall, and he was pointing inside. Everyone turned around at this, but they only felt their eyes blurring as a figure flew past with a terrifying speed. It was an old man dressed in a gray robe, with a sword on his back. His figure flashed by and soon appeared next to Jin Wuji. He then stretched out a hand, took hold of Jin Wuji's neck and fiercely pressed it down. Pung! The power behind this move was extremely large, and it had broken the table into 2 halves. By now, the dishes and wine had all been served, so instantly, the wine and gravy from the dishes had all splattered onto Jin Wuji's face. This was an uninvited calamity, definitely an uninvited calamity. How could Jin Wuji have imagined that someone would actually dare attack him? Moreover, his attacker was so overwhelmingly powerful that he didn't even have the ability to defend himself, and in such a confusion, suffered this kind of calamity. Ha ha ha, you were so arrogant, why don't you try being arrogant again? Guoding Quan had raced over, and aimed a few kicks on Jin Wuji's behind. His whole face was twisted in fury, as if he wanted nothing more than to commit murder. Jin Wuxiang was initially startled, before shouting, "Why are you beating him up?" He felt very wronged. Because, all this while, the Jin brothers were always the ones who bullied others, yet today, his elder brother had actually been thrashed by 2 people they had never even met before. He didn't even manage to react in time due to shock. Guoding Quan took one glance at him, and only felt that Jin Wuxiang was a completely unfamiliar face. It was not the icy beauty from before. Still, he did not take this disparity to heart, and only continued to kick Jin Wuji furiously. The people involved in the confrontation each had their own side. One side had misunderstood while the other side was stuck in a complete daze, but others immediately came to a realization. Guoding Quan had brought his master who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, Duanwu Changfeng, yet had hit the wrong target. Per Jin Wuji, he was painfully thrashed for no reason. At this moment, he had to be feeling extremely gloomy. No wonder Ling Han had yielded the seat to Jin Wuji just now. Apparently, he had already planned to lay a trap for him. Damn, This guy was really too devious. When they saw that Jin Wuji was still being thrashed while Jin Wuxiang seemed to be at a complete loss, quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing out loud. Moreover, the laughter was getting louder and louder, and finally spread to all the others as everyone held their stomachs and laughed raucously. Guoding Quan too finally realized that something was wrong. He turned Jin Wuji to face him, and when he saw the unfamiliar face that was completely splattered with wine and gravy, he could not help giving a start and said, "Who are you?" "Pooh!" Jin Wuji instantly spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. "You don't even ***king know who I am, then why did you beat me up? And you had thrashed me so ferociously even? Who had he actually offended? No matter who you people are, I will definitely have you pay the price," he roared in fury. Chapter 64. Chapter 64, Effortlessly Controlling the Situation. "This is not the person who had thrashed you." Duanmu Changfeng was also startled, as well as slightly displeased. "Since this wasn't the guy, then why the heck did you point at this guy the moment you came in?" "No!" Guoding Quan was also very depressed. "Since you're not Ling Han, then what the heck were you doing sitting here?" He looked at Jin Wuji and asked, "Where is the person who had been sitting here before?" Jin Wuji was not a fool, so he immediately realized. He had fallen into Ling Han's trap. This brat had offended these two people, and coincidentally, he had demanded for the brat to relinquish his seat to him. As a result, the brat took advantage of the situation to lay a trap for him, causing him to suffer horribly. "That damned little beast! Ling Han!" he roared loudly. "Get out here, I'm going to kill you!" Ling Han? When Duanmu Changfeng heard this name, killing intent instantly appeared in his heart. This was the name of the junior who had caused him to sustain extraordinary loss of face. An old fox like him of course immediately realized that both he and Jin Wuji had been played by Ling Han. Shwa! Everyone's eyes turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han was sitting upright, and even with so many people focused on him, he did not feel the slightest bit nervous. He took a sip of wine, and could not help recollecting that in his last life, all the wines he had drunk were the best quality wine. It was definitely not something this so-called excellent wine could be compared to. For the moment, Jin Wuji had no intention of getting his revenge on Guoding Quan. Moreover, the latter had Duanmu Changfeng with him, and this was a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear whose prowess was stronger than his own by who knows how many times. He looked at Ling Han, his hands tightly gripped into fists. Gravy and blood had spilled from his wounds due to being smashed into the table covered his face. His appearance was ferocious and twisted, it could practically scare kids to tears. "Ah, you've played us!" Jin Wuxiang called out, pointing at Ling Han. He had finally realized the truth. "Ha ha!" Quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing aloud. So the saying held true, though a dragon has 9 sons, each of them are different. This Jin Wuxiang was a complete idiot. It didn't even seem that he and Jin Wuji could have come from the same father and mother. "You are indeed extremely daring," Duanmu Changfeng said darkly. He actually dared to manipulate even himself. Looks like this little junior was really tired of living. Seeing Duanmu Changfeng speak, Jin Wuji immediately fell silent. Obviously, the former also had some kind of conflict with Ling Han, and this man was in gushing spring tear, and his status was far higher than his own as well. Even if he intended to get his own revenge, he would have to wait for his turn. Duanmu Changfeng took great strides towards Ling Han, his eyes cold. He had already decided, even if Shu He Xian and Zhang Weishan both came, he would still not spare this insolent junior. Guoding Quan followed closely, a cold smile upon his lips. This brat dared to trick even his master. He was really dead this time. Duanmu Changfeng did not walk very fast, but every step he took caused the whole main hall to shake slightly, showing the towering rage that this man, one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, was currently feeling. Even Qi Yongyi, as the 4th prince, dared not speak up in defense of Ling Han at this moment. What was Ling Han going to do now? His move just now was indeed very beautiful, managing to trap and trick two of his enemies simultaneously. However, no matter if it was Duanmuchang Feng or the Jin clan, either was a party that could be offended without harsh consequences. Everyone felt extremely curious about his next move. Ling Han did not look at all like that kind of fool. Lu Yutong immediately stood, and assumed a defensive stance in front of Ling Han. However, she was immediately pushed lightly aside by Ling Han. Ling Han only said calmly, "The four winds rise, clouds in the heavens thrown into disorder, the tiger and crane both appear, creating invincibility. She!" Duanmuchang Feng's advancing steps paused, and he looked as if he had been struck by a lightning bolt, wearing an expression like he had just seen a ghost. But after a short moment, he immediately looked very excited, so much in fact that even his body began shaking. This was the verbal chant for the 8th move of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts was a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique. He had learned it from a secret scroll he had obtained from an ancient site. Unfortunately, due to the long passage of time, the parts showing the last two moves had completely deteriorated. There was only a verbal chant as well as an illustration for the 8th move, but there wasn't even a name for the 9th move left behind. The reason why he could afford to not take Zhu He Xian and Zhang Wei Shan seriously was because he possessed the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The three of them were all in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier, but because of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, even if Zhu He Xian and Zhang Wei Shan joined forces, they would still be no match for him. But it was precisely because this sword arts technique was so powerful that he desired to obtain the last two moves even in his dreams. Thus, when Ling Han recited the verbal chant from Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, how could he not be excited? You know it?" Duanmuchang Feng said, his voice stuttering. "Naturally." Ling Han nodded. "Will you teach me?" The old guy's face was filled with expectation. Ling Han smiled and said, "That will depend on your performance." Duanmuchang Feng did not even spend any time to consider, and said, "Whatever requests you have, just say it. Whether it is alchemical pills, or resources for cultivation, I can give them to you." See! Around them, everyone was at an absolute loss. Just now, Duanmuchang Feng seemed like he would stop at nothing in his desire to kill Ling Han, so how come his attitude changed so drastically? Was this some kind of magic trick? Master Dash! Guoding Quan had become anxious. What kind of demonic magic had this brat used? Ling Han pointed at Jin Wuji and his brother, and turned to point at Guoding Quan as well, and said, "These three guys, they are unpleasant to my eyes." "Very well!" A very experienced man like Duanmuchang Feng of course instantly understood Ling Han's meaning. He did not say another word before he lifted up Guoding Quan in one move and in a flash arrived in front of the Jin brothers. His left hand gave a shove, and a very powerful, irresistible force caused the two Jin brothers to fall down onto the floor. Pun 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 pun. Duanmuchang Feng kicked and punched, ravaging the three as much as he liked. Everyone else was completely dumbfounded. Ling Han had just said a few words that sounded like some kind of verbal chant, and Duanmuchang Feng actually became Ling Han's underling, obeying his commands. Admiration for Ling Han had risen in all of them. Whether it was Guoding Quan, the Jin brothers, or even Duanmuchang Feng, they had all been played, being in the palm of his hand. The Jin brothers were completely depressed, the depression sinking into their very bones. What great enmity or conflict did they have with Duanmuchang Feng? Previously, they had been thrashed by this old man for no reason, but that could be explained by it all being a misunderstanding due to Ling Han tricking them both. But what about this time? But since a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring tier had made his move, what else could they do other than obediently suffer the thrashing without complaints? Qi Yongye's face was twitching all over. Since the moment he saw that Ling Han had Lu Yutong accompany him, he already knew that this guy was definitely not ordinary, but to be awesome to such an extent caused even him to experience a great shock. Duanmuchang Feng was not just a warrior of Gushing Spring tier, he was also a black-grade low-level alchemist, being slightly well-known in Rain Country. Even if a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier met him, the former would be extremely courteous and polite. But now, to put it in a coarse manner, what difference did he have with being Ling Han's underling, simply doing as the latter commanded? What happened to the dignity of an alchemist, or the moral integrity of a warrior of gushing spring tier? However, if he maintained a good relationship with Ling Han, did that mean he would be able to take Duanwu Changfeng under his own banner? The first prince was so excited just from being able to befriend Guoding Quan. If he managed to attract Duanwu Changfeng to his side, then his position would be incomparably steady, and no one would be able to stop him from inheriting the king's position. And thus, when Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan arrived at a later time, they saw such a scene. Duanwu Changfeng was thrashing his own disciple and the Jin brothers as if he had gone mad, while the person they were supposedly here to rescue, Ling Han, was leisurely sitting, drinking wine and eating. What kind of game were they playing here? Chapter 65. Chapter 65, Summoned by the Deyuan King. Guoding Quan and the Jin brothers felt gloomy to the extreme. For Guoding Quan, master beating up his disciple was the same as a father beating his son, a law of nature, so how could he even think of avenging himself? If he did, that would fall into the crime of ingratitude and cheating his own master, and wherever he fled to, he'd be pointed out by every man. Meanwhile, the Jin brothers knew that the old man that had thrashed them was the one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, a person who possessed extremely high status. Even when the Deyuan King met him, he'd still treat the latter with utmost courtesy and politeness, so even if the older generations of the Jin clan found out about this matter, they would still definitely not seek vengeance for them. Which means that they had suffered this thrashing for absolutely no reason. Ling Han. The three of them gritted their teeth in fury. The chief culprit behind all this was Ling Han, and he had become the object of their utmost hatred. Young friend Ling, are you all right? Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan had raced over, anxious expressions on their faces. I'm fine. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. Of course he's fine, everyone else thought. He played a trick on both the Jin brothers and Duanwu Changfeng, and now even Duanwu Changfeng was listening to his every command. How could he possibly not be fine? However, when they saw the two alchemists arrive and present an overwhelmingly polite demeanor towards Ling Han, they could not control their lips from twitching, and everyone was becoming even more curious about Ling Han's actual identity. Who was this guy? The heartbeat of the fourth prince had quickened as he decided to spare no effort to pull Ling Han into his own support camp. If he managed to obtain the support of 3 alchemists through Ling Han, then what else did he have to fear from a mere Lu clan? The position of the Deyuan King would definitely fall to him. Ling Han did not intend to stay any longer in this place, and so turned around to depart. Duanwu Changfeng, uncaring of his own face, followed behind him to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. He still had to ask Ling Han for the verbal chants and illustrations for the last 2 moves of the sweeping cloud sword arts. Regarding this matter, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan were both very shocked. They had never thought that Ling Han not only had a terrifying level of achievements in terms of alchemy, but possessed extraordinary understanding even in the field of martial arts, so much that he could even guide Duanwu Changfeng, who has been praised as one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy. Ling Han did not go back on his word. Upon their return, he taught the missing 8th move of sweeping cloud sword arts to Duanwu Changfeng. As for the 9th move, he would of course not immediately teach him that last move to avoid Duanwu Changfeng abandoning his benefactor after reaching his goal. At the very least, he would wait until he himself had broken through to the gushing spring tier. By that time, there would be no harm to teach him the 9th move. Anyways, this was just a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique, and for Ling Han, it was completely unimportant. Duanwu Changfeng apparently understood this as well, as he excused himself shortly after obtaining the verbal chant and illustration for the 8th move. Whether he managed to get the 9th move or not would depend on his future performance. When he returned to his room, Ling Han very quickly fell asleep, and Ling Dongxing had completely no idea how big a commotion his son had created that night. None of those who had the qualifications to be invited to the fourth prince's banquet were mouthy idiots, so the news about Ling Han had only spread around in a very small circle. Early morning the next day, a servant from the royal house of the Deyuan king arrived at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, saying that the Deyuan king had invited Ling Han over for a meeting. The Deyuan king wanted to see him? Ling Han did not have Lu Yutong follow him. He alone went with that servant to the royal house of the Deyuan king. Very soon, when they arrived at the study, he saw this local overlord. The Deyuan king was already 60 years old, but because he had a high cultivation level, he did not look old at all. On the other hand, his figure was tall and sturdy, and his whole body exuded a very powerful aura, displaying the atmosphere of a ruler. The sixth layer of spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han only took one glance, and there was no way for this man to conceal his cultivation level in front of his eyes. On the path of martial arts, every fourth and seventh layer was a different threshold. This Deyuan king should have been stuck on this layer for a very long time. Greetings, Deyuan king! Ling Han raised his clasped hands as a salutation. Rise! The Deyuan king raised his hand, and said with a smile, Youngsters nowadays are really impressive. Not only managing to reach the fourth layer of element gathering tier at such a young age, you even have 3 black-grade alchemists revolving around you. Even I have not had such an honor. The Deyuan king had obviously already found out about the previous night's event. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, I only have some slight academic attainments in alchemy, which allowed me to share a common language with Grandmaster Zhu and the others. The Deyuan king naturally would not believe Ling Han's words, yet he did not attempt to point it out bluntly. He only kept his extreme curiosity to himself, curiosity how such a genius had appeared within the area under his jurisdiction, and a genius that had 3 alchemists willingly revolving around him at that. Then what about that girl of the Lu clan? He asked with a smile. The issue about Lu Yutong couldn't be hidden from him either. If one is born handsome, he'd be popular everywhere, Ling Han said exaggeratedly. Ha you! The Deyuan king pointed a bit at Ling Han, as if reprimanding him for being too slick in his speech. He changed the topic swiftly and asked, Whom do you think out of my 2 sons is more suitable to inherit my position? Was it appropriate to ask him this question? Ling Han smiled and said, The 2 princes each have their individual merits. Who exactly is more suitable? I believe that Deyuan king, your majesty, you have your own thoughts. Then what need is there for me to speak more on the subject? The Deyuan king once again broke out into loud laughter as he thought silently, This slippery kid, his argument is watertight. He once again changed the topic, and said, I have one more daughter who has yet to marry. Are you willing to become my son-in-law? Damn, were all the people from the royal house of the Deyuan king so direct? Previously, when he went to register himself for the tournament, the chief butler had also attempted some matchmaking on the spot. And now this man, the actual father of the girl, was the same, as if he was in a hurry to marry off his daughter. Ling Han hurriedly waved his hands and said, My heart is fully focused on martial arts, and within the next few years, I will not consider marriage. The Deyuan king could not help feeling that it was quite a pity. Even Zhu Hexian, Zhang Weishan and Duanwu Changfeng treated Ling Han with utmost respect, so obviously this young man had terrifying ability in the field of alchemy. If the latter could become his son-in-law, then he would become an unimaginable aid to their family branch. But since Ling Han had already tactfully declined the offer, as a king, he could not be so shameless as to insist. Moreover, his daughter was beautiful, so it was not like there was no one willing to marry her. If you encounter any troubles in future, you may come and ask me for help. The Deyuan king gave Ling Han a very heavy promise. Even if he could not manage to become Ling Han's father-in-law, he was still determined to maintain an affable relationship with this young man. Many thanks for your generosity. Ling Han accepted this favor with grace. After all, the current him was still too weak, so he still needed this kind of support and assistance. When he returned to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he discovered that the 4th prince had come to pay him a visit, and had been waiting for a very long time for his return. The fourth prince conversed with him for a very long time, but did not really say anything substantial. He was simply trying to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Obviously, the fourth prince knew that he was too weak to actually persuade Ling Han to join his ranks. As a result, it was only a relationship between two contemporaries, and the fourth prince didn't even hint that he intended to have Ling Han join him as an underling. On Ling Han's side, he did not mind having another friend, and so, the two of them naturally had a very delightful conversation. After resting one more day, the actual day of the Deyuan tournament had finally arrived. The first thing on the agenda was to draw lots. After confirming the 50 seated participants, the other participants would be divided into groups based on the lots they drew. They would be separated into 50 small groups, which would respectively ascend to their own tournament stage. Then the battle would begin, and the last person standing on the tournament stage would be one of the top 50 participants of this Deyuan tournament, successfully obtaining a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy. Ling Han had also obtained the place of a seated participant, and this guaranteed that in the first round of battle, he would not encounter any opponents that were too powerful. Of course, no matter how strong his opponent was, he would still hold no fear. "Big brother Ling!" Li Hao and the others were standing nearby, waving at him. Chapter 66. Chapter 66. Tournament begins. I'm done for this time. I drew the 7th group, and I heard that the seeded elite in that group is Sima Wendong. He's the strongest member in his generation of the Sima clan of Deyuan City, and he's already reached the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Lu Dong sighed, shaking his head. I'm worse off. I'm in the first group, and the seeded elite of my group is the 4th prince. I really don't have a sliver of hope left now. Zhu Shui sighed similarly, but she quickly became excited and said, "But it's possible that Li Hao may advance and obtain a spot to enroll in the academy." Ling Han glanced over at Li Hao. Within this time of over a month, he had managed to reach the late period of the 3rd layer of element gathering tier. This, of course, was due to the effects of the 3 transcending origin pills he had taken. With this kind of cultivation level, along with his saber chi, the possibility of Li Hao managing to advance was very high. After all, he had drawn the 40th something group, where the seeded elite was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Although a person in the 4th layer still possessed a great advantage against someone in the 3rd layer, Li Hao had saber chi, which would be more than sufficient to compensate for the gap between himself and his opponent. Additionally, the seeded elite had to face the imminent danger of being ganged up on by everyone else. As long as Li Hao was low-key enough, concealing his power for a sudden eruption at the very end, then it was very possible that he would be the one having the last laugh. Lu Dong and the others were very envious. They had also asked for Li Hao's guidance on saber chi, but no matter how much effort they exerted, they still could not manage to form chi. When we were in Guarak town, we thought we were the strongest. But it was only when we came here that we realized that the real gathering spot for geniuses was this Deyuan city. Parties like the Jin clan and the Lu clan can so easily produce 10+ seeded elites. Chen Pingzhu shook his head, his face filled with disappointment. He and Zhou Chang managed to break through to the element gathering tier with the help of the green spiritual fruit. However, there were so many powerful warriors gathered for the Deyuan tournament this time. If one did not at the very least possess the prowess of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, then unless he was like Li Hao who had managed to form saber chi, there was absolutely no chance of obtaining a place in the top 50. "Big brother Ling, what about you? Which group did you draw?" The 5 of them looked at Ling Han in askance. They were all well aware that Ling Han was very powerful, so as long as he drew a good lot, then the chances of him being able to advance into the top 50 were extremely high. Ling Han smiled and said, "I'm the seated participant of the 40th group." Pooh! Lu Dong and the others all choked, and they looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at some kind of monster. A few months ago, this guy had still been the same as them, also in the body refining tier, yet now, he actually managed to become a seated elite? How could they not be shocked by such a thing? They were also filled with disbelief. You're actually in the 4th layer of element gathering tier already?" Li Hao punched a fist on Ling Han's chest jokingly. But once he recalled that Ling Han had given him 2 extra transcending origin pills, and had also declared truthfully that he had more in his possession, then it was nothing strange for him to be able to advance to the 4th layer of element gathering tier in that span of time. If he's a seated participant, then he'd be able to avoid encountering the other elites. Plus, Big Brother Ling still has sword chi, so he'd definitely be able to win, Lu Dong said, his face filled with envy. Zhu Shuai and the others nodded in agreement. If you managed to enter the top 50, you'd be able to obtain a ticket into Huyang Academy, which was the dream of every martial artist in Rain Country. If they knew what had happened the night before, they'd probably be shocked to the point that their eyes would practically pop out. He actually managed to have 3 black-grade alchemists follow behind him. Ha ha ha, you want to win? That's impossible, an arrogant voice exclaimed, and a young man appeared in front of them. He was Feng Luo. Previously, after they had managed to kill the red-scaled dragon snake, he had attempted to steal the fruits of their labor. Yet, in the end, due to the final counterattack, all his underlings were killed, while he himself received a harsh thrashing at Ling Han's hands, but fortunately managed to survive. They had never thought that he would reappear so quickly with his lofty, arrogant attitude in front of them. There was absolutely no improvement to his cultivation, and he was still in the 9th layer of body refining tier. For the majority of martial artists, that one step into the element gathering tier was an extremely hard one to take. It was not strange at all to spend more than 10 years to take that single step, which was also why Heng Zhan had been so overbearing and forceful, using any means possible to steal the green spiritual fruit. Big Brother Ling is a seated elite and he's very powerful. Why wouldn't he win? Zhu Shui asked Feng Luo. Because I am also in the 40th group, Feng Luo declared confidently. Ha ha! Lu Dong and the others broke out into laughter. One side was in the element gathering tier, while the other was still in the 9th layer of body refining tier. The gap between their respective prowess could really be compared to the gap between heaven and earth. No matter how it was, Feng Luo really did not have a sliver of a chance at winning. Laugh, go on and laugh. You'll be crying in the afternoon. Feng Luo spoke coldly. Lu Dong and the others were all curious. What kind of trump card was hidden up his sleeve that allowed him to have such overwhelming confidence? Ha 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 ha. Feng Luo laughed loudly, walking away with his head held high. Don't worry about him. He's just a nasty character, Ling Han said, smiling. The other 5 nodded in agreement. The drawing of lots was completed before noon, and they would be having the tournament stage battles in the afternoon to select the 50 strongest martial artists. After that, there would be another round of battles the next day to decide the 10 strongest as well as the first place. After lunch, everyone soon arrived at the wrestling ring in the city. There would usually be various martial arts activities held here. During the New Year, when a ceremony to offer sacrifices to the gods took place, there were also martial artists versus demonic beast battles held in this location. As a result, the yellow sand of the wrestling ring had been soaked with blood since long ago. Today, because of the Deyuan tournament, all other activities and events were of course suspended. There were already 10 tournament stages put up in the gigantic sandy zone in the center. Later, there would be simultaneously 10 groups battling it out on the stages, and it would all be finished after only 5 rounds. Ling Han was the seed participant of the 40th group, so he had to wait until the 4th round to go up onto the stage. Lu Dong and Zhu Shui were in the first round. One of them was on the first tournament stage, while the other was on the 7th. There were about 70 people in one group, and the difference in numbers between different groups were in the single digits, because it was possible that there would be some who would forfeit at the last second. There was absolutely no suspense about the conclusion of the first round. All the victors were the seeded elites. They were all like the 4th prince, in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so even if the others all joined forces to gang up on a seeded elite, they were still no match for him. Moreover, in the case of the 4th prince, who would actually dare to offend this man who may become the next Deyuan king? They obviously did not dare to join forces against him. Additionally, the elites who took part in the first round were also the strongest of the 50. They were all in the top 10 of the previous Diyuan tournament, like the fourth prince, Jin Wuji and Li Dongyu. Occasionally, in the second and the third round, there would be an unknown martial artist who managed to win, but victory did not fall to either Chen Pingzhu and Zhou Chang. The two of them were mercilessly eliminated from the tournament. Thankfully, they'd be able to get another chance 3 years later. By that time, it was highly likely that they would have managed to reach the middle stage of element gathering tier, and thus become seeded elites, and so would have a bigger chance of advancing to the next round. This also confirmed the value of the green spiritual fruit. Otherwise, they may have only just reached element gathering tier 3 years later, so there'd be no second chance for them. "Honor, go on!" Ling Dongxing lightly patted Ling Han's shoulder, smiling brightly. The fourth round was about to begin. Half a year ago, he would have never been able to imagine that it was possible his own son to obtain the place of a seeded elite. Liu Yutong nodded to Ling Han. She did not have the slightest bit of doubt that it was possible for Ling Han to lose. As a seeded elite, Ling Han was the first person to step onto the stage, while the other participants in his group would follow after. There were about 70 of them, and Feng Luo was one of them. "Begin!" a warrior in gushing spring tear announced. He had been assigned as a referee by the royal house of the Diyuan king. "Ha ha ha, clear the area!" Feng Luo declared proudly. Instantly, there were at least 30 people who drew their weapons simultaneously and gathered with Feng Luo protected in the center. Then, they began to push on towards the others. The audience below the stage were all dumbfounded. Was this even okay? It was really too shameless. Chapter 67. Chapter 67, Just a Bunch of Sheep. This is too despicable. Downstage, Zhu Shui and the others had all started shouting in anger. No wonder Feng Luo had been so sure of himself. He had apparently bribed some of the martial artists in the same group to work for him. More than 30 of them were working together, and since this was the 40th group, the seeded elite would not be too strong, thus they'd be more than enough to sweep away all other contenders. Then, the others would all leave the stage of their own free will, so the remaining Feng Luo would naturally be able to obtain a place in the top 50. And he of course would not unreasonably demand to enter the top 10, and definitely not the first place. After all top 50 participants were guaranteed to be enrolled into Huyang Academy. He's too shameless! Completely unfair! All the others downstage had started calling out as well. This was an act of openly breaking the tournament regulations. Yet the referee only gave a cold humph and shouted, "Shut up!" Since the tournament regulations did not specify that it was not allowed for individual martial artists to join forces, then Feng Luo's actions were of course allowed. It could at most be argued that he had managed to take advantage of a loophole in the rules. What power and influence a warrior in gushing spring tear possessed! All the people downstage were immediately silenced. No wonder that guy had been so confident. He had already bribed some of the others in his group, Zhu Shui said, extremely angry. To be ganged up on by so many people, plus at least more than 10 of them have already reached element gathering tier. It would be difficult for Ling Han to fight against the onslaught of so many. He's going to be in big trouble. Lu Dong frowned. Not necessarily. Li Hao shook his head and said, Big Brother Ling should have already reached the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Furthermore, he has even formed 4 flashes of sword chi, so there is still a chance for him to win. He definitely has to win. That guy, Feng Luo, is really too despicable. The 5 of them all began to cheer Ling Han on. Compared to them, Liu Yutong and Lu Dongxing were extremely calm. A bunch of sheep working together would still only be a bunch of sheep. How could they possibly be able to match a mighty lion? Ha ha ha, leave this guy for last. Chase all the others off the stage. Feng Luo crowed, and commanded the group of more than 30 martial artists to begin wiping out the others. Their combined might was extremely powerful, and due to their cooperation, they had managed to get all the other outsiders, aside from Ling Han, off the stage, and that was with the mere price of 7 of their numbers being pulled down alongside their victims. Now, this was a battle of 29 against 1, and out of the 29, 14 were in element gathering tier. Oh no, though this Brad is a seeded elite, since he's been arranged to be in the 40th group, that means that he's most likely only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. Yeah, many ants can kill even an elephant, and the other party even has 10 plus warriors in element gathering tier working for him. I really can't bear to look at that guy, Feng Luo's expression at having his villainous scheme succeeding. Hush, lower your voices. Although the Feng clan isn't a major clan, Feng Luo's elder brother is a well-known genius in our Diyuan city. In the last round of Diyuan tournament, he managed to defeat the 4th prince to get the 1st place. I heard he's already stepped into Gushing Spring tier. What, Gushing Spring tier, is that true? Of course it's true. Hiss, no wonder that guy, Feng Luo, dares to be so arrogant. Listening to the discussions of those downstage, Feng Luo felt extremely proud of himself. He did break the rules, but so what? What, you guys can't accept this? He challenged the people downstage. Bite me if you can. You can do something like this too if you have a good elder brother like me. Most of the audience offstage started gnashing their teeth in hatred. They really felt that this guy was despicable down to the bones, making them all feel the urge to rush onto the stage to give him a good thrashing. Ling Han, previously you made use of the advantage in numbers against me, but this time, I have so many people on my side. Even if every one of them only hit you once, they'd be able to give you a terrible thrashing. If you know what's good for you, then kneel down immediately and beg me for mercy. I may even consider hitting you a few times less. Feng Luo said, pointing at Ling Han. Had it been them bullying him because of them having an advantage in numbers previously? Indeed, at the time, all his lackeys had died, while Ling Han's side had 7 people, so that was actually them bullying him because of their advantage in numbers? This guy was indeed shameless to a whole new level. Ling Han shook his head and said, Looks like if I don't hurry up and throw you off the stage and allow a clown like you to continue your performance, the fury of the masses would probably be incited. Ha ha! Laughter broke out instantly downstage. What a hateful guy! You still dare to be so stubborn! I won't spare you! Feng Luo was driven practically mad from fury. He extended a finger and pointed at Ling Han and said, Beat him! Give him a good beating! Understood! The group of more than 20 people all rushed towards Ling Han. All of them were brandishing their respective weapons, presenting a fierce image. The tournament stage battles allowed the use of weapons. Otherwise, the martial artists would not be able to display their strongest abilities. However, this also increased the danger of the battles. So if you were afraid of dying, then it would be best if you quickly jumped off the stage on your own. If you stayed on the stage, then you should have a certain level of mental preparation. Ling Han did not bother to use his sword. He charged over with only his fists. Using dashing panther fists would be more than enough to handle these people. Pun 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 pun! He charged forward and every single person who stood in his way was flung off stage with a single punch from him. One has to understand that although his cultivation level was only the 4th layer of element gathering tier, with the eruption of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his prowess could be compared with that of a normal person in the 8th layer of element gathering tier. Additionally, the dashing panther fists was a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, so wouldn't it be more than enough for him to single-handedly deal with these people? By the time Ling Han reached Feng Luo, all the others had been thrown off stage by him. There was absolute silence. Wasn't this guy too powerful? Since he was the seed of the 40th group, then shouldn't it be obvious that he was only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier at most? But judging from his ferocious attacks, that was definitely power that was at least of the late stage of element gathering tier. Could it be that he had deliberately hidden his actual cultivation level, pretending to be a pig to devour the tiger? However, there were naturally the older generations of the various great clans present on this occasion, so there was no lack of people with cultivation levels above the 5th layer of element gathering tier. Naturally, they managed to easily sense Ling Han's aura, and it definitely showed that he was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. This caused them to be confused as well. They all started murmuring amongst themselves, exchanging their thoughts about how this could be possible. No, impossible! Feng Luo said, shivering. His expression was one of complete disbelief. The script wasn't supposed to be like this. He should have successfully and easily entered into Huyang Academy. Then, with the care and assistance of his brother, easily break through to element gathering tier. If he was lucky, he'd be able to consume some kind of spiritual fruit, and may even be able to break through to gushing spring tier. But all of his plans were rendered useless if he couldn't manage to enter into Huyang Academy. Arrogant, just continue being arrogant. Ha ha ha, just continue staying on stage, if you dare. The people downstage all started taunting Feng Luo. They had already long been displeased by this guy, but just now, because he had a lot of people on his side, they didn't dare to make too much of a fuss. But what about now? Who would have imagined that Ling Han would actually be so powerful? You immediately admit defeat, then get off the stage. Otherwise, I will tell my brother to take care of you. With the taunting resounding in his ears, Feng Luo finally reacted. He actually pointed at Ling Han and commanded him to give up. Ling Han shook his head. This guy had really been spoiled. He was a complete idiot. Pa! He leapt and aimed a kick at Feng Luo's lower abdomen. So, the guy flew off stage. He held onto his lower abdomen, gasping in pain. It even looked like he was about to tear up from the pain. 40th group, Ling Han wins, the referee announced. No! This place is mine! It's mine! When Feng Luo heard this, he actually jumped up and said to the referee, Change your judgment immediately, or else I'll have my brother beat you to death. Everyone else instantly broke out into incredulous laughter. Someone merely in body refining tier actually dared to threaten a warrior of gushing spring tier. It was absolutely hilarious. Get lost! The referee gave a cold humph. He stretched out a hand and gathered his origin power to form a gigantic hand, which took hold of Feng Luo and threw him out. Chapter 68. Chapter 68, The Second Battle. Origin power being able to take on a form, this was the symbol of a warrior of gushing spring tier. Surrounded by taunts and mocking laughter, Feng Luo fled with his tail between his legs. If it was not due to the fact that his elder brother, Feng Yan, was indeed an incomparable genius, then that warrior of gushing spring tier absolutely had the right to kill him on the spot. The most important thing in martial arts was the hierarchy of martial artists, and Feng Luo's previous actions could practically be considered a grave breach of these unspoken rules. So even if he had killed him, the Feng clan would dare not make a fuss about it. Brother Ling, congratulations! Congratulations, Brother Ling, for having such an excellent son. Brother Ling, this time you'll have to host a dinner banquet and celebration. After looking up at the stage, many of the major characters of the various clans of Grey Cloud Town began offering their congratulations to Ling Dongxing. Ling Dongxing naturally laughed loudly at this, absolutely delighted. Before, he had also imagined such a scene happening, but he knew this was not a realistic dream. He never thought that there would be a day that this dream would become reality. Ha ha ha! This stupid brat is just lucky enough to obtain a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy. There shouldn't be any chance of him advancing further than this. He shook his head, looking very modest. Actually, anyone could see that he was smiling so wide that the corners of his lips seemed like they were about to split apart from the effort. It was obvious that he was close to being beside himself with joy. True, whoever it was that had a son that was qualified enough to enter into Huyang Academy, he would also smile so proudly. Brother Ling, you don't have to be so modest. For those of us who came from Grey Cloud Town, it is already very impressive to be able to enter the top 50. Moreover, your son is only 17 years old this year. So he'd still be able to enter the Deyuan tournament that will be held 3 years later and 6 years later. Who knows, maybe in the next tournament, he'd qualify for the top 10, and in the one after, he'd place first. Someone said with a laugh. Although Ling Han had fought a beautiful battle this time, but still, his opponents this time were really too weak. None of them thought that he, with his cultivation of only the 4th layer of element gathering tier, would be able to enter the top 10, let alone defeat those in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, like the 4th prince. Ling Dongxing laughed mischievously. He of course could not say that his son was full of grand ambitions, and that he was aiming directly to get the first place this time. Honestly, he too did not dare believe it. After all, the gap between cultivation levels was too great. Ling Han walked down the stage, and everyone stepped forward to offer their congratulations. After all, anyone who managed to enter into Huyang Academy had excellent prospects in his future. Who knows, they may be able to become an overnight celebrity, and become a person that would hold immense status and power in this Rain country. As a result, no one would mind speaking a few words of praise at this moment. In any case, they wouldn't lose anything from it, right? And if Ling Han managed to end up with great achievements in the future, they'd be able to climb to a higher status using their friendly relations with him. Ling Dongxing, as the clan head of the Ling clan, was no stranger to this kind of social niceties. He took care of everything, making everyone feel that they have been paid adequate attention. Father and son, as well as Lu Yutong, returned to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. After one night of rest, the battles to decide the top 10 from the 50 who advanced into the second round would take place. In truth, the top 10 would all receive rewards. Of course, the further ahead your placement, the better your prize. On the other side, Li Hao had also managed to advance into the top 50, and had demonstrated extraordinary talent with his saber chi, causing many people to be very optimistic about his future prospects, as there were no more than 10 in this generation of young people of Diyuan City that have managed to form chi. However, some of the senior members of the Li clan had arrived with Li Hao, so naturally, they had to celebrate with their own people first the night before. Thus, they did not invite Ling Han, and neither did they invite Lu Dong and the others. But once they returned to Guarak town, the Li clan would definitely hold a grand celebratory banquet. The next day, Ling Han and Lu Yutong once again arrived at the wrestling ring of the city. Meanwhile, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan were in the process of concocting the reverse pill, and have long since entered the oblivious mode, so they did not come to watch Ling Han compete. "Big brother Ling!" Li Hao walked over and stood by his side. He then directed a respectful gaze at the 4th prince, Li Dongyu and the others. They had all been people that he had once idolized and looked up to. He never thought that he would be able to compete with them now, causing him to feel unreasonably exhilarated. "Do not look down on yourself. You have already formed saber chi, so your future achievements will definitely exceed them," Ling Han said, giving him a comforting pat on the shoulder. "And?" Li Hao nodded seriously. In truth, the real difference between himself and the 4th prince and the others was his lacking cultivation level. But since he's already managed to form saber chi, he too would be able to become a ruler amongst those of the same cultivation level in future. "Brother Ling!" When they saw Ling Han approach, the 4th prince and the others clasped their hands politely and spoke up in greeting. Li Hao could not help gaping at this. This Ling Han was really too popular, wasn't he? As if he was the moon which the stars could only revolve around. Even the 4th prince was not as popular as he was. That was natural. Currently, there stood 3 dignified black-grade alchemists behind him, so from a certain angle, he was even more influential than the Diyuan king. "The battles to decide the top 10 will begin now." The chief butler appeared. His eyes were squinted, making him look like a doddering old man. However, his voice was extremely loud and clear, spreading to every nook and cranny of the wrestling ring. "The rules are very simple. There are 10 tournament stages here. Choose any which one and walk onto the stage. If there's no one there, then you will be the stage master. If there's already someone, then you will challenge the stage master. Everyone will only have a single chance to challenge the stage master. By sundown, the 10 people who are remaining on the tournament stage will be the top 10. This was indeed very simple. They simply had to battle it out. When the chief butler had finished speaking, the majority of the participants all looked at the 4th prince, Li Dongyu, and the others. These people possessed overwhelming power, so if any of the others wanted to obtain a place in the top 10, then they'd definitely want to avoid encountering these powerful warriors. The 4th prince laughed loudly, and exuded the air of a ruler. He gave a great leap and landed on the first tournament stage, where he stood with his arms crossed behind his waist, waiting to be challenged. I'll present myself first! Li Dongyu leapt onto the second tournament stage. Jin Wuji, Bailey Tingyun, Xia Zhong and the others also respectively claimed a tournament stage, and in an instant, 7 tournament stages were owned. These people all had absolute confidence, and were not the slightest bit worried that they'd be tired out by fighting one battle after another. Ling Han took one step forward, also preparing to step onto one of the remaining stages. Big brother Ling, let's just wait until the afternoon. We'll have a bigger chance that way, Li Hao hurriedly advised. Haha, it's fine. There are not many here who can match me. Ling Han gave a nonchalant wave of his hand. He gave a great leap and landed on the 8th tournament stage. Soon after, the 9th and 10th tournament stages were also occupied, and with that, the 10-stage masters have appeared. Now, it was time to see who would go up to challenge them. I'll go! Someone jumped up onto the 10th tournament stage and the first battle began. Right after, another person leapt up onto the 9th tournament stage. But what made the audience feel very curious about was that no one actually went to challenge Ling Han. There was no lack of elites in the 9th layer of element gathering tier here, so naturally they should be able to sense that Ling Han was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. So theoretically, this kind of cultivation level was the lowest of all 10-stage masters, but why didn't anyone go up to challenge him? They didn't understand. The majority of those who advanced into the top 50 had attended the 4th Prince's banquet just a few days ago, so of course they knew that Ling Han actually had the support of 3 black-grade alchemists. Who would dare challenge him? Do you not intend to give face to the 3 alchemists behind Ling Han? In any case, aside from the 4th Prince, Li Dongyu, and other such powerful warriors, there were still 2 or 3 slightly weaker competitors. So there was no need for them to stir up the hornet's nest that was Ling Han. But of course, the unexpected could still happen. I will challenge you! A young man jumped up onto Ling Han's tournament stage. He was a dark horse that had suddenly appeared in the Deyuan tournament this time, so he had not received an invitation to the 4th Prince's banquet a few days ago. As a result, he naturally had no idea of Ling Han's background. Chapter 69. Chapter 69, Top 10. My name is Du Jingying. Remember my name, because soon, this name will be known all around the world, the young man exclaimed proudly. This man looked to be in his early 20s, and his cultivation level was the 6th layer of element gathering tier. Who knew where he got such overwhelming self-confidence from? But only he himself knew that he had only been in the 9th layer of body refining tier 2 years ago, and could not manage to break through to element gathering tier. Yet he obtained a fateful encounter, which caused his cultivation level to spike up. After only 2 years, he was already in the 6th layer of element gathering tier. After such instantaneous success, he naturally became condescending towards everything, and thought that he'd be able to reach the 9th layer of element gathering tier next year and break through to gushing spring tier in the year after, sweeping away all the other geniuses and elites of the world. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, Being too idle would be a bit boring anyways, so I'll play with you for a while. How dare you! Du Jingying leapt forward suddenly, the long saber at his waist drawn. The light of the saber flickered, exuding a coldness like frost. He gave a loud shout and brandished his saber in a slash, which formed a terrifying cold flash that flew towards Ling Han's waist. The advantage of a sword was its lightness, while the saber had its ferocity. This saber slash was fierce and merciless, so it did have a certain level of standard. Ling Han drew his sword, and with a ding, the blade of the sword screamed as it passed over the saber's blade all the way to the hilt of the saber, easily dispersing the power of this slash as it kicked up a rain of sparks. The blade of Du Jingying's saber stopped at a spot 3 inches below Ling Han's rib, but its energy was completely exhausted, and it was no longer a threat. You do have some ability, Du Jingying snorted coldly. But in front of me, all that is pointless effort. I'm destined to be a genius that will become world famous. Everyone else is only fated to become stepping stones on my path to advance, to be mercilessly swept away by me. He resumed his offensive. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The saber flashed, striking with considerable power. Those who were standing downstage were completely struck speechless. They have seen many proud people, but Du Jingying was not just proud anymore. He was already arrogant to the point that he didn't know his own measure. Ling Han casually parried his attacks. In any case, the tournament stage battles would only end by sundown, so there was no difference whether he defeated Du Jingying sooner or later. Du Jingying shouted and yelled, using all his ultimate techniques. From the look of it, he was at an absolute advantage. He naturally thought that this was to be expected. His opponent was only in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, a whole 2 layers below him, so how could Ling Han be a match for him? To be able to disregard the gap between cultivation levels and challenge one at a higher cultivation level was of course something that only he could do. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. I have to admit that you really are not bad. But everything will cease at this point. I'm about to get serious. Du Jingying laughed loudly, causing everyone else to think that he was even more of an idiot than before. His expression grew serious, and he once again brandished his blade. Shwa! There actually appeared a flash of saber chi. N! Gasps exploded downstage all of a sudden. Saber chi! It can't be! That's the sign of a ruler! I didn't realize that this egomaniac was actually quite capable. This time, Ling Han should not be able to parry his attacks anymore. I heard that there are no more than 10 within this generation that have managed to grasp chi. Du Jingying was very proud of himself. If it was not because he had managed to form saber chi, how would he dare keep such a high profile? He laughed loudly and said, "To be able to make me use saber chi, you should feel very honored." Ling Han shook his head and said in disappointment, "You only have 1 flash of saber chi? Hey, what kind of expression is that? Isn't 1 flash of saber chi already very awesome?" Du Jingyi was extremely displeased. After seeing him forming saber chi, this brat was still not scared witless. "It's enough to defeat you 100 times!" he yelled loudly. He started brandishing his saber in a dance, and his saber chi moved unhindered. The power behind it was extremely terrifying. Ling Han laughed, and casually waved his own sword in a slash, similarly producing a flash of sword chi. Pooh! Everyone downstage choked in shock. Those who managed to form chi would have the potential to be a ruler in martial arts. But normally 4 flashes of chi would be regarded as a minor accomplishment, 7 flashes as a major accomplishment, while 10 flashes would be completion. And only those who managed to reach the level of minor accomplishment had the right to be named as rulers. But even if only 1 flash of chi was formed, that was already a very big deal, as it was extremely rare. Thus, now that there appeared 2 people who have both managed to form chi, and were even battling on the same stage, it naturally caused everyone to gasp in surprise. This was something that they had expected would only happen at tomorrow's battle, at the very least. "What, you actually also have sword chi?" Du Jingying's eyes were wide with astonishment. He looked extremely shocked. "Is this very odd?" Ling Han said with a laugh. So what if you possess sword chi? You'll definitely still be no match for me." Du Jingying raised his saber up high, standing in an attacking stance. The fateful encounter that he had obtained included a book of saber arts and a bottle of alchemical pills. The alchemical pills allowed him to break through to element gathering tier and also caused his cultivation to soar. The book of saber arts was also extraordinary. It contained 2 different stages. The first stage was a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, whereas the second stage was upgraded to black-grade low-level. He was only in element gathering tier, so naturally only managed to learn the first stage. Yet it already allowed him to form saber chi, which was proof enough of the extraordinary power of this saber arts technique. "Cleaving mountain saber arts!" he roared loudly. He brandished his saber in a slash, and the saber chi he produced looked like a dragon, extremely dazzling and possessing a terrifying level of power. Ling Han's sword rose in a slant, using the shocking electricity sword arts, and the sword chi he possessed flew forwards. Pun! Sword chi and saber chi crashed into one another, and caused a sudden explosion. A dazzling light appeared, and it was visible that the saber chi was actually completely shattered by Ling Han's attack. His sword chi, like a rainbow, continued forward to cut into Du Jingying's chest. Instantly blood splattered. Ah! Du Jingying gave a pained shout, and was flung directly off stage by the power of the sword chi. See! Everyone was overwhelmed with shock. Both martial artists had formed chi, yet why was there such a big gap between their respective power? There were only a few who had also managed to form chi. It was only them that knew that there were stronger and weaker chi. It was definitely not something that guaranteed you success if you just managed to form it. However, no matter how weak it was still chi, so it was impossible that it couldn't even withstand a single attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so difficult to form chi in the first place. That could only mean one thing: Ling Han's sword chi possessed overwhelming power. Even the fourth prince, Li Dongyu, and the other stage masters who occupied the earlier stages revealed expressions of shock. This kind of attack power caused even them to be slightly surprised. Yet they thought that their cultivation level was so much higher than Ling Han, so they absolutely could still suppress him with their much stronger prowess. Such an easy victory also caused Ling Han's image to become stronger and taller, letting everyone know that he was not as simple as simply depending on 3 alchemists as support for himself. The challenges continued. Most of the people had focused their attention on the 9th and 10th tournament stages. The stage masters of these 2 stages were the weakest and had already expended much energy during the continuous battles. This was the best path to obtain a place in the top 10 for everyone else. When the sun set, the top 10 martial artists were decided. There was not much surprise this time round, as the top 10 were mostly within expectations. Though Li Hao tried his best in his battles, his lacking cultivation level was a very solid disadvantage. The best he could do was to fight evenly with someone in the 4th layer of element gathering tier, but against a stronger person, he could only accept defeat. Ling Dongxing was again surrounded by the masses. Most of them had not thought that Ling Han could actually manage to advance into the top 10. This was an extremely huge honor. In future, he may even have a chance of becoming a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier. This naturally caused Ling Dongxing to beam with joy. When he saw that his son managed to attain such an accomplishment, he was the most delighted out of all of them. If he advanced one step further the next day, then he'd be able to get the dark moon grass. Ling Han was filled with anticipation. Chapter 70. Chapter 70, Son of Heaven Fist Technique. The night passed silently. On the next day, the 3rd round of the Deyuan tournament continued. This was the finals, and today, the first place winner would be decided. Can Han'er really get the first place? Ling Dongxing was both expectant and anxious. Before the tournament began, he believed that his son would be able to at least advance into the top 50, but dared not dream that he would also make into the top 10. After all, Ling Han's cultivation level was honestly still too low. But Ling Han's extraordinary success the previous day had been a very joyous surprise to Ling Dongxing, making a sliver of expectation for that illusory first place rise in him. However, on the path to that first place, there stood powerful warriors like the 4th prince, Li Dongyu, and Jin Wuji. Even if he himself was the one competing, he couldn't be sure that he would win. What more his son? Initially, it was fine because he didn't really bear any real expectations. But now that a spark of hope had flickered to life within him, he had become worried about winning and losing. Liu Yutong smiled and said, "You don't have to worry, uncle. Since Ling Han said he can get the first place, then he'll definitely get the first place." Ling Dongxing was astounded. This girl actually had more confidence in his son than even him. Looks like her affections for Ling Han have become deeply rooted. When he thought about this, he no longer bothered to worry too much about the first place. If his son could obtain such an excellent partner, then he really would die happy. The regulations for today's tournament round are as follows. The chief butler continued to be the host of the tournament. You shall go up onto the 10 tournament stages according to yesterday's order. This would be your temporary placement. Anyone who is ranked lower can challenge the person one rank higher. If you win, you will replace him. But if you lose, you can only stay on your own stage and defend, and you will no longer be able to issue any challenges. When everyone has lost the right to challenge others, or when the sun sets, your final rankings will be confirmed. After every battle, both sides will have half an hour to rest. In that time, you may only challenge, but cannot be challenged. The moment the chief butler finished talking, Li Dongyu took a great leap and arrived on the first tournament stage. He said, "Fourth Prince, I would like to challenge you." "Haha, I too want to see if your little Tianyuan hands has advanced to the 7th level." Qi Yongyi laughed heartily. He leapt up and also arrived on the tournament stage. "It will definitely not disappoint you." Li Dongyu gave a long hiss, raised his hands and charged towards Qi Yongyi in attack. The two of them were both in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. 3 years ago, they were close rivals, but the 4th prince was slightly better. These 3 years, Li Dongyu had buried himself in cultivation, and there was an extremely obvious improvement in his abilities. "Brother Li, your improvement is indeed very large, but if I have to be honest, it was a great miscalculation on your part to stay in Deyuan City in a sulk." Qi Yongyi displayed a fist technique. Every fist was imposingly majestic, like the arrival of a noble ruler. It not only possessed great force but also the ability to shake the heart, causing a powerful shudder to rise up from the depths of their hearts. "The Imperial City is the real sacred land of martial arts. There, you will encounter even stronger opponents, and every one of them is so strong that it will give you the shivers. Under this kind of pressure, the improvement in my abilities is far from what you can imagine. Take this, my son of heaven fist technique. Hong, hong, hong." His movements were very pronounced, and every fist possessed overbearing power. A layer of qi was wrapped around his fists, increasing the might behind each blow. It was fist qi. Li Dongyu was very shocked. He could only retreat in the face of Qi Yongyi's fists. His expression revealed deep regret. 3 years ago, he had only been slightly weaker than Qi Yongyi. After a tough battle of at least 500 moves, he had been defeated due to being at a very slight disadvantage. Yet now, the battle had only just begun, and he was already suppressed by his opponent. He didn't even have the opportunity to fight back against the 4th prince's terrifying fist technique. Punch! He received a heavy punch and his figure retreated continuously. A sliver of blood could be seen at the corners of his lips. "I am not a match for you," he said bitterly. They were both in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, yet he was not just a slight bit weaker than his opponent. His opponent was on a wholly different level than himself. "This is the Son of Heaven fist technique taught to me by His Imperial Majesty. There is no shame in losing to this fist technique." Qi Yongyi smiled, giving his opponent a way out. His Imperial Majesty was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier. How could any martial arts technique that he taught not be extremely powerful? There are 4 different levels for this fist technique. The power of the first level reaches a yellow grade high level technique, the second level is a black grade low level, the third level is a black grade medium level, and the 4th level is a black grade high level martial arts technique. Qi Yongyi said with a smile. His Imperial Majesty has a fondness for talent, and there is a considerable number of geniuses in the Imperial City who have been taught the Son of Heaven fist technique. On the spectators' seats, everyone had exclaimed in surprise. The 4th prince was really too powerful. In the previous Deyuan tournament, Li Dongyu could still manage a tie with the 4th prince, but this time, he couldn't even hold on for 10 moves. They all looked at the 4th prince with envy. The 4th level of the Son of Heaven fist technique was equivalent to a black grade high level martial arts technique. If they actually managed to learn up to that level, unfortunately, although His Imperial Majesty was fond of talent, how could he possibly pass on a black grade high level martial arts technique so easily? At most, he should have only passed on the 1st and 2nd level. But a black grade low level martial arts technique was awesome enough. One has to know that even among the great clans of Diyuan City there were not many clans who had in their possession a black-grade martial arts technique. How about it? Brotherly, are you interested to come with me to the Huyang Academy this time? Chiyongyi laughed. Li Dongyu could not stop a slightly moved expression from showing on his face. The gap in power between himself and the fourth prince allowed him to finally gain his resolve. Diyuan City was too small. He had to go out of this city to be able to obtain a greater improvement. He returned to the second tournament stage, and the battles continued. However, because he had just battled, no one could challenge him yet. Jin Wuji, I would like to challenge you. From the fourth tournament stage, Bailey Tingyun gave a long hiss and leapt up onto the third tournament stage. Jin Wuji smiled serenely and crossed his arms behind his back, looking very casual. He stretched his arms a bit then said, Then I'll give you a bit of guidance. He was also a disciple of Huyang Academy. After 3 years of hard work at cultivation, the improvement to his abilities was obvious. The only person that he took seriously among the other competitors was the fourth prince. The two of them began their battle. Bailey Tingyun was indeed extraordinary to be able to break through to the 8th layer of element gathering tier at the mere age of 17 years old. His prowess was only slightly weaker than Jin Wuji's, and every move he made was powerful, causing the expressions of quite a few of the seniors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier to waver as they pondered that, if it was them battling against him, there was a possibility that they would be completely defeated. Yet Jin Wuji moved very skillfully, and with a single hand, he easily dispersed the power behind Bailey Tingyun's every attack, showing that he possessed a power greater than his opponents. He really proves himself to have returned from Huyang Academy. He's really too powerful. They're all in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, but most of them may not be a match for 1/10 of Jin Wuji. For this tournament, we only need to look at him and the fourth prince. One of the two of them would definitely get the first place. True, there's definitely no doubt about it. Hearing the discussions of the people around him, Bailey Tingyun gave a HN and drew a short staff from behind him. He gave it a light shake, and from both ends, there actually appeared another section. It had transformed into a staff of about 2 meters in length. It was made from some unknown kind of material. The whole staff was as black as ink. I heard that the Bailey sect has an ultimate treasure. Rumor has it that it was the weapon of an ultimate warrior, and was refined by this warrior over many days and nights. It possesses a terrifying destructive ability. Could this be it? Jin Wuji asked. Yes, this is the Staff of Destruction. Bailey Tingyun nodded and gave the staff a light wave. Wank! The black staff trembled slightly and a powerful shock wave spread out from it. Then let me experience attacks from this Staff of Destruction. Jin Wuji revealed a solemn expression. This solemnity was not because of Bailey Tingyun, but because of the Staff of Destruction. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.